Chapter 2593. Ah. It's already dark? Luo Qingtong's lips twitched as she looked at the dark sky. She didn't know what to say. Oh my god, why is she so easy to say? Cough. Well, I actually wanted to say good evening. Luo Qingtong braced herself and said. Really? Yi Qianming narrowed his eyes. This woman's ability to lie through her teeth was getting better and better. Yes, yes. Luo Qingtong nodded quickly. She was relieved when she saw that Yi Qianming didn't seem to notice the kiss mark on her neck. At this moment, Yi Qianming's voice suddenly sounded. I heard that when people are nervous, it's easy to pant and say the wrong thing. Luo Xiaoqi, what are you nervous about? Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows and looked at Luo Qingtong with a faint smile on his face. Did this woman think that she could get away with it? Hiss. When she heard Yi Qianming's voice, Luo Qingtong gasped instantly. She looked at Yi Qianming, and her mind was filled with thoughts. Oh my god, oh my god. Did he find out? Did he see through it? But it didn't seem like it. Luo Qingtong imagined the scene when Yi Qianming found the kiss mark on her neck. He would fly into a rage. He would hit her without saying a word. The only thing that didn't happen was this. Did he find out or not? But regardless of whether he found out or not, Luo Qingtong felt that she had to prepare for the worst. Otherwise, if she was really found out, she wouldn't even have a chance to save herself. Luo Qingtong thought so and suddenly coughed softly. She said to Yi Qianming, Brother, you probably don't know. After we fell asleep last night, a super big mosquito suddenly flew into the tent. I was bitten by the mosquito countless times last night. Were you bitten? Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianming with a hopeful face. She had already thought about it. If Yi Qianming said yes, then it must be because he found the hickeys on his body. At that time, he would just say that it was a mosquito bite and not admit it even if he was beaten to death. If he said that he didn't, it would mean that he didn't discover anything. It was even better if he didn't find out. He didn't have to worry anymore. When he found out later, he would also think that it was a mosquito bite. She really was a genius. As for Luo Qingtong herself, she had already used the cupping technique to leave a few marks on her body. Although the marks were very different from the hickeys, it was impossible for mosquitoes to only bite one shape, right? Right. So what if her mosquito pack was different from the rest? Luo Qingtong's words almost made Yi Qianming laugh in anger. Mosquito? That was a really big mosquito. Yi Qianming gritted his teeth as he glared at Luo Qingtong. He almost couldn't hold it in anymore, and wanted to expose Luo Qingtong's identity. Then he would pull her into his arms and tell her how that big mosquito stung people. This woman. To think that she could come up with such an excuse and reason. Yi Qianming took a deep breath. He always felt that this woman was the tribulation in his life. It made him love and hate, anxious and angry. She was really made by God to be his jinx. Otherwise, why would he be so helpless? I wasn't bitten by a mosquito. Hurry up and go back to the tent. Ben. I don't want to wait for you to sleep at night. Yi Qianming's voice was cold, and he finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. If he continued to talk to this woman, he would be angered to death sooner or later. Chapter 2594. Oh that, brother, I've thought about it. I'll sleep in the same tent as them tonight. Otherwise, it'll be too much trouble for you. In fact, Luo Qingtong was afraid of her. Oh my god, she didn't even know that she was sleepwalking in the middle of the night. She thought about how she left a kiss mark on Yi Qianming's body in a daze last night. Who knew what she would do tonight? She'd better keep a distance from Yi Qianming. However, just as she thought of this, she was lifted up by Yi Qianming in an instant and brought back to the tent. Sleep in the same tent as others? Yi Qianming's thin lips curled up slightly. For some reason, he felt like he was grinding his teeth. How can that be? There's still a big mosquito in my tent. Before it leaves, you'd better stay here obediently, lest I'm the only one who gets bitten. After all, that mosquito only appeared after you came. What do you think? Yi Qianming's voice was gloomy. If he didn't have a trace of self-control and knew that this woman didn't want to reveal her identity, he really would have pressed Luo Qingtong into his arms and kissed her fiercely. This woman still wanted to sleep with others? He didn't allow it before he knew her identity, so it was even more impossible now. She dared to step out of this tent. He would never let her do as she wished. Yi Qianming could do anything for Luo Qingtong. She didn't want to reveal her identity, so he pretended that he didn't know. She was bold and arrogant, so he let her be. As long as this woman was happy, it was fine. But the only thing she couldn't do was to let him lose her. Not to mention sleeping in the same bed with another man. Of course, a woman couldn't do it either. Yi Qianming's eyes were cold, and he directly threw Luo Qingtong onto the bed. The latter's lips twitched and she didn't know what to say. She really wanted to grab this man and tell him. The mosquito you're talking about is me. It's me. As long as you let go of me, there won't be any more mosquitoes. But she didn't dare. She was Luo Xiaoqi. Luo Xiaoqi. If she admitted that she had molested Yi Qianming, the consequences would be terrible. She wouldn't be able to bear it at all. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched, and she decided to give up in the end. Forget it. She would sleep here for another night. When there were no more mosquitoes biting him tomorrow, she should be free. At that time, he would have to sleep in another tent, even if he had to sleep with Big Sister Ingyu. Luo Qingtong thought. She covered her head with the quilt and fell asleep. Before going to bed, she did not forget to tie her hands and feet with silk thread. She didn't believe that she would still be able to touch Yi Qianming. For Luo Qingtong, liking Yi Qianming had already become an instinct. It had been such a long time since he had transmigrated. The man had already integrated into her life, just like the other half of her life. She unconsciously wanted to hug him and rely on him. These feelings of love and affection that he had never felt had anything to do with him had all appeared in front of him. Therefore, she absolutely believed that she would unconsciously touch Yi Qianming after falling asleep in the middle of the night. That was because this man had already melted into her life. Chapter 2595. The girl's figure was petite, and she directly fell into his arms. They fit perfectly as if they were a match made in heaven. Humph, this is the most obedient moment. Yi Qianming snorted and kissed her lips fiercely. Feeling his breath, Luo Qingtong snorted twice and responded to him automatically. Her whole body was desperately trying to squeeze into his arms. His hands also began to move restlessly. But her hands and feet were tied and she couldn't move for a while. In the end, she could only give up. Her voice was soft, but it was also domineering and proud. She unconsciously fought with Yi Qianming for control of the kiss. The back and forth between the two of them was like a battle between two kings. Of course this time, because Luo Qingtong's hands and feet were tied, Yi Qianming naturally won. He pressed Luo Qingtong on the bed and kissed her carefully. The candlelight and the shadows under the moon were entangled. The next day, Luo Qingtong woke up in Yi Qianming's arms. That's right. In his arms. That wasn't the point. The point was that she took off Yi Qianming's clothes. She took it off. Luo Qingtong looked at everything in front of her in a daze. She looked at her hands grabbing Yi Qianming's clothes. Half of the man's clothes had been pulled down by her. Half of his honey-colored chest and half of his arms, as well as his strong shoulders, were exposed in the air. Yi Qianming's hair was loose and scattered on the bed. At this moment, he was wearing a white jade mask and looking at Luo Qingtong with a dark face. Don't ask her how she could see that his face was dark even with the mask. It was because the low pressure around him was about to freeze into ice, okay? Luo Qingtong looked at her tied hands that were restless. She couldn't touch him and leave a kiss mark, so she actually took off his clothes. If she had known earlier, she would have tied all 10 of her fingers. That, brother, listen to my explanation. Luo Qingtong swallowed her saliva. Oh my god. Yi Qianming was a feast for the eyes. She really wanted to pounce on him. Sob, sob, sob. She had to try her best to resist. Yi Qianming's eyes were cold as he looked at her. Last night, you said you would help me get rid of the mosquitoes. Is this how you do it? As he spoke, he casually raised his hand and pointed at the scratches on his neck and shoulders. Luo Qingtong covered her face. What a beast! What a beast! It was obvious that she wanted to take off Yi Qianming's clothes, but the latter refused, so she caught him. Why did she have to be such a beast? Chasing away mosquitoes? Could these words be any more shameless? Yi Qianming didn't kill her on the spot because her identity was similar to Luo Qingtong. Right? Luo Qingtong rejoiced in her heart that Yi Qianming felt a sense of familiarity when he looked at her. Otherwise, she would probably become a lecherous woman who made a move on her own man and was beaten to death by her own man. *CK, such a tragic death doesn't suit her at all, especially if she died in the hands of her own man because of molestation. That would be too aggrieving. Brother, listen to my explanation. I really didn't do it on purpose. It's probably because I was poisoned by that mosquito last night. I dreamed that I was the mosquito and skinned you. Brother, I'm completely sincere. At this point, Luo Qingtong was almost touched by herself. *CK. She was really a genius to be able to lie to this extent. Chapter 2596. Pfft. Yi Qianming's words almost made Luo Qingtong spit out a mouthful of blood. She hurriedly wiped off her saliva. She didn't know what to say about her own deception. Damn. This time, she completely believed Yi Qianming's words. She was definitely the only one who could say the word hubby. It was impossible for Yi Qianming to know these two words. Oh my god. Luo Qingtong covered her face and felt her teeth hurt badly. How was she going to explain the meaning of this word to Yi Qianming? It was simply tearing up. This was simply a big blood pit. And it was the kind of pit that she dug for herself. That actually the word old means that you are very experienced and steady. The word public means that you are very clear about public and private matters. It means that you are fair and impartial. Brother, I have been praising you in my dreams. Are you touched? Luo Qingtong's words became smoother and smoother as she spoke. In the end, she forced herself to explain. I see. Yi Qianming looked at her and smiled slightly. The man's appearance was extremely beautiful. Even if this smile was through the mask and Luo Qingtong couldn't see it at all, she still felt that the other party seemed to be glowing. Then Luo Xiaoqi, can you tell me what you mean when you say that you are my wife? Yi Qianming's tone was slow. His voice was very slow and his words were very clear. In order to prevent Luo Qingtong from pretending not to hear it, he also directly sent those words into Luo Qingtong's ears. Luo Qingtong's mood at this moment was like thousands of grass mud horses galloping through the Gobi Desert. What kind of motherf *cur was this? If it weren't for her, she would definitely let the other party know how to write the word death. Yi Qianming was still waiting for Luo Qingtong's answer. Ever since he heard Luo Qingtong's nonsense about the word husband, he immediately knew that the meaning of this word was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. It was very likely that there was a deeper meaning that Luo Qingtong couldn't say. That was why this woman gave a random explanation. The more she explained, the more she hid. Yi Qianming was in a very good mood at this moment, so much so that Luo Qingtong couldn't answer, and ran away without catching her. Because he already got the answer he wanted. Luo Qingtong ran out of the tent and still didn't wake up from her trapping. Damn, this was simply too much of a trap. Damn it, she was really speechless. Fortunately, she ran away, otherwise she would have died. *S's star. Not far away, when Bei Qing and Feng Yu saw Luo Qingtong rushing out of Yi Qianming's tent, the corners of their lips twitched. Master is teasing the evil doctor again. If the evil doctor finds out. Feng Yu touched his forehead and had a terrible headache. The two of them already knew the truth from Yi Qianming. It was mainly because they were prepared to die to persuade Yi Qianming not to abandon the evil doctor. But the truth thrown out by Yi Qianming almost made them dizzy. Luo Xiaoqi was the evil doctor. She deliberately ate the small illusion pill to disguise her identity. The two of them were dumbfounded when they heard it. On one hand, they admired the evil doctor's tricks. On the other hand, they were depressed that their master and the evil doctor had already recognized each other. Why didn't they recognize each other? They were still having fun. Not only that, their master didn't let them recognize the evil doctor. How long were the two of them going to play around like this? Master, do you know that you have been led astray by the evil doctor? Chapter 2597. He was wearing a simple white robe, which made him look like an immortal. At this moment, his feet were lightly tapped on a tree branch. He stood in the middle of a forest and looked at the group of figures in front of him indifferently. people from the demonic moon sect. His face was indifferent, and his eyes were very indifferent. However, the meaning of his words made the hearts of the people in front tremble. Who are you? The group of demonic moon sect people in front of him shouted fiercely. The injuries in their group were very serious. Almost all of them were injured. If the people from the Chu and Lian families had not come to the abandoned continent and made it noisy, they would not have been able to escape from the hands of Zhang Beiyue and the others. After all, in this abandoned continent, they were seriously injured and could not be compared to Zhang Beiyue and the other elite disciples of the three-star Zhang family. The demonic moon sect was an evil sect in the three-star Great Heaven domain. Its strength was almost the same as the Zhang family. Logically speaking, they should not have been forced to such an extent by Zhang Beiyue and the others. However, the mistake was that they did not know that Zhang Beiyue and the others had come to the abandoned continent with a great conspiracy. Therefore, after seeing the actions of Zhang Beiyue and the others, they quietly followed and did not bring the most elite disciples of their family. On the other hand, Zhang Beiyue was the first young master of the Zhang family. He was the strongest genius of this generation of the Zhang family. His strength was comparable to an ordinary elder with real power. Moreover, the people he led were also the most elite disciples of the Zhang family. In this way, the demonic moon sect people suffered a great loss when facing Zhang Beiyue and the others. If the people from the Chu and Lian families had not arrived and discovered the Tianluo grass, they would not have been able to escape. Later on, the Chu clan and Lian clan were able to successfully spread the news of the Tianluo grass to the outside world, because of their help. If they had not held back Zhang Beiyue and the others, the people from the Chu and Lian families would have died long ago. However, even so, they could not leave the abandoned continent at this moment. Not to mention, they already knew that the purpose of Zhang Beiyue and the others was in the heart of the continent. It was very likely that they had discovered a peerless treasure. Under such circumstances, how could the demonic moon sect members let the matter rest? But now that they were seriously injured, there was nothing they could do. At this moment, Yu Mingqian appeared. Everyone looked at Yu Mingqian warily. They didn't know how Yu Mingqian had seen through their identities and found them. Yu Mingqian didn't care about their gazes at all. He stood on the tree branch and looked at the people of the demonic moon sect coldly. He said, "You don't have to be afraid of what I will do to you. I'm not interested in trash like you." Someone from the three-star region? To Yu Mingqian, the young master of the Inscription City's Federation of Trade Unions, it wasn't even worth mentioning. The reason he was able to discover the demonic moon sect's traces was naturally because he had sensed their tyrannical aura, which was different from that of the Chu and Lian families. With the help of the inscription man-seeking array, he easily found their whereabouts. Yu Mingqian wasn't interested in why people from the three-star domain would appear on the abandoned continent of the six-star domain. Chapter 2598. Luo Qingtong was getting closer and closer to Yi Qianxian. She might not have noticed it, but Yu Mingqian could tell that she was treating Yi Qianxian and the others differently. The other party and those white jade masked men knew each other. Not only that, but Luo Qingtong had also recognized the white masked men. Yu Mingqian was very afraid of Yi Qianxian's strength. He regretted not attacking Luo Qingtong when they were in the Heavenly Wind Mercenary City. At that time, she had not fully come into contact with the white masked men, and she did not recognize them. Under such circumstances, it was best to attack Luo Qingtong. But he missed the opportunity. Now he could only rely on these evil moon sect members. "I can treat your injuries, and I can also help you improve your strength. As long as you promise me one thing." Yu Mingqian looked at the evil moon sect members. He believed that they would agree. After all, he was the only one on the abandoned continent who could help them. Looking at their current situation, there were obviously other enemies on the abandoned continent. They had no other choice but to promise him. Yu Mingqian's words made the evil moon sect members even more surprised. "Why should we believe you?" a ferocious-looking evil moon sect member said. He looked covetously and greedily at Yu Mingqian's fairy-like face. He laughed ferociously and said, "Since you've said it so clearly, you pretty boy, then we'll capture you and force the method out of you. Isn't that the same?" As he spoke, He looked at Yu Mingqian with a ferocious expression and said, "Look at your delicate skin. I'm afraid you can't withstand a few rounds of torture. If you know what's good for you, hand over the method immediately. We might be able to give you some comfortable punishment." As he spoke, he laughed arrogantly with a smug look on his face. These evil moon sect members were originally from an evil sect. They did not have any taboos or bottom lines. Yu Mingqian had come alone. Although they were a little afraid, after carefully inspecting the surroundings and finding that there was no ambush and only Yu Mingqian, they immediately relaxed. Not to mention, although Yu Mingqian's temperament was extraordinary, it didn't have any deterrence or threat. Seeing that there was no trace of cultivation on his body, the group of demonic moon sect members felt disdain in their hearts. They were indeed seriously injured, but not just anyone could order them around. Since this immortal-like man wanted to make use of them, then don't blame them for being ruthless. Wouldn't it be better to capture him and slowly force him to confess his methods than to agree to his request? Why do I have to do as he says? The other party was really like a celestial being who was above the mortal world. He was really too naive. The man from the demonic moon sect was pleased with himself. The others also remained silent, tacitly agreeing with that person's actions. Their figures spread out and surrounded Yu Minglong. Seeing this scene, Yu Mingqian's eyes, which were as light as colored glass, suddenly blossomed. The coldness in them was extremely strong. Interesting. You people really don't know what's good for you. Chapter 2599. His aura completely changed the moment he made his move. An extremely cold and murderous power suddenly bloomed from his body. At the same time, an inscription pattern in his hand rushed toward the demonic moon sect member in front of him. The inscription pattern also appeared. In an instant, the sound of countless weapons whistling could be heard from it. In an instant, the demonic moon sect member seemed to be in a blood-red azura field. His surroundings were filled with weapons and traps. Battle formation initial appearance. Turning void into reality, place of death. Battle inscription mark. Are you a battle soul master? Or are you a battle soul master who can turn the surrounding murderous aura into weapons? Everyone's faces were filled with shock. There were strong and weak battle soul masters. In addition to the battle inscription pattern, and their own cultivation strength, there was another way. It was based on the depth and research of the battle inscription pattern. When an ordinary battle soul master controlled the battle inscription pattern, he could at most manifest the murderous aura in the battle inscription pattern. They could either turn into the shadows of swords or shrieking beasts. There were many different kinds of murderous aura. However, there was a type of battle soul master who, after deep research, could turn the battle inscription pattern in his hand into a death trap, trapping and killing the enemy he wanted to deal with there. That was not a level that an ordinary battle soul master could achieve. That would require an even more profound inscription ability. Not only that, but strength and cultivation were also indispensable. For such a battle soul master, unless his enemy's strength was far above his, he could break through 10,000 spells with brute force. Otherwise, once trapped by the death trap formed by his battle inscription pattern, it would be a situation of instant death. It was like being trapped in the domain of a sky martial realm expert. Life and death were in his hands. Just as everyone was thinking this, they heard the demonic moon sect member, who was trapped by the death trap formed by Yu Ming's battle inscription pattern, scream shrilly. Then everyone saw that he was imprisoned in mid-air. Then countless weapons pierced his heart in an instant. Not only that, his body seemed to be suspended by an invisible force. While hanging there, countless weapons flew past. While piercing his heart, they did not forget to slice off his flesh piece by piece. His blood-curdling screams were shrill, but in an instant, he turned into a pile of white bones. Under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the demonic moon sect member who had turned into a pile of bones was still alive. What a hair-raising way to die. Everyone's eyes were filled with extreme fear. You are a battle soul master, who are you? They looked at the man in front of them who looked like he was floating in the air, and had no lethality at all. Yu Mingqian had completely retracted her power. She had returned to her previous powerless state. However, the crowd had just witnessed him killing the demonic moon sect member. How could they still dare to treat him as a weakling? At that moment, his heart was trembling with fear. Their strength had not recovered yet. All of them were seriously injured. They were no match for Yu Mingqian. Moreover, even if they had recovered their strength, the death trap formed by the battle inscription pattern Yu Mingqian had just revealed was not enough. Chapter 2600. What was going on? How could there be such a terrifying figure in this 6-star region's abandoned continent? Given his strength, he could easily sweep across this abandoned continent. Why would he need them to do something for him? Everyone was trembling in fear as they looked at Yu Mingqian and asked, "My lord, could it be that you're also here because of the news that the Zhan family obtained? If that's the case, we're willing to be your lackeys." Their words made Yu Mingqian raise his eyebrows slightly. News from the Zhan family? He originally didn't care why these people from the demonic moon sect had come. However, after hearing what they were saying, it seemed like their purpose in coming to this abandoned continent wasn't simple. "Yes," a member of the demonic moon sect said with trepidation. "The Zhan family seems to have obtained news about an ancient godly item. The ancient godly item is in this abandoned continent. It's very likely that it has something to do with the changes in the heart of the continent and the birth of the sky grass." They quietly appeared in this abandoned continent and sealed off all information. It was by chance that we discovered their movements and followed them. We were accidentally discovered by them. Those people from the Zhan family are currently chasing after us. "My lord, if you're also here for the ancient godly item, we're willing to listen to your orders." The member of the demonic moon sect smiled at Yu Mingqian ingratiatingly. In their opinion, Yu Mingqian's strength was tyrannical, yet he had hidden it. Since he had appeared in this abandoned continent alone, he must be here for the ancient godly item, just like them. In that case, they would naturally listen to his orders. After all, they were no match for him. They also mistook Yu Mingqian's request for them to listen to his orders and help him obtain the ancient godly item in the heart of the continent. Ancient godly item? Yu Mingqian's eyes narrowed slightly. That pair of eyes that were as light as colored glass was filled with surprise. He hadn't expected that he would receive such news when he had just randomly found some people to attack Luo Qingtong. However, he didn't know if these people's information was true or false. If it was really an ancient divine object, it would not be a bad idea to obtain it. In this world, anything that had even the slightest bit of information about God was a 1 in a million treasure. However, it was really surprising that such a treasure would appear on a small abandoned continent in a small 6-star region. Yu Mingqian's words, coupled with the meaning in his eyes, made the demonic moon sect members realize that they had guessed wrongly. This man with astonishing strength actually didn't come for the ancient divine object. They had spilled the beans. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have opened his mouth. That way, after they had gained the support of the other party and gained strength, they could then snatch the ancient divine object. Everyone was vexed in their hearts, but they didn't dare to show it on their faces. Yu Mingqian glanced at them and said, "We'll talk about the ancient divine object later. What I want you to do is something else." He told her about Luo Qingtong. "It's this young man named Luo Shaoqi. I want you to capture him. Leave it to me." Chapter 2601. He didn't know if the ancient divine objects mentioned by these people were true or false, but the news about Luo Shaoqi's divine inscriptions was basically confirmed. Naturally, he knew what was more important. As soon as Yu Mingqian's words came out, the people of the evil moon sect looked at each other in dismay. They looked at Yu Mingqian, not understanding why he didn't do it himself. It was just a young man. However, they didn't dare to ask any more questions when they saw Yu Mingqian's gaze. Yu Mingqian's methods were too ruthless and terrifying. They all had a shadow in their hearts. This master was probably not an ordinary ruthless, cold, and ruthless person. As the crowd thought this, they immediately agreed, not daring to say a word. After Yu Mingqian glanced at them coldly, he took out some elixirs and handed them to the people of the evil moon sect. The latter and the others originally wanted to say that the spirit qi in the abandoned continent had a corrosive effect, so the elixirs had no effect. However, when they saw the elixirs that Yu Mingqian took out, they were surprised. This was because the elixirs that Yu Mingqian took out were actually effective. Although they were very weak, they were effective in the end. This was more important than anything else. After all, as long as they were effective, taking more of them would be equivalent to the effect of an elixir. As the crowd thought this, they immediately took the elixirs and swallowed them. Yu Mingqian looked at them coldly, not saying anything. Ordinary elixirs naturally had no effect. However, the elixirs that Yu Mingqian had were the top elixirs of the Inscription Association. Not only that, but they were also supported by his medicinal inscription technique. The retention effect was comparable to the super-perfect elixirs refined by Luo Qingtong. Under such circumstances, the elixirs that he took out were naturally effective. It was just that they were not as effective as the elixirs refined by Luo Qingtong. However, they still had a healing effect on the injuries of the people of the Evil Moon sect. Not only that, but Yu Mingqian also asked the people of the Evil Moon sect to take off their clothes. All of their bodies were engraved with inscription arrays that could increase their strength and concentrate all their potential into one point. After doing all this, Yu Mingqian floated away, leaving the people of the Evil Moon sect behind. They looked at his back in shock and fear. The other party was simply too terrifying. She was a perfect example of what it meant to have the appearance of an immortal but the heart of a snake. No one dared to stay here any longer. After Yu Mingqian left, they quickly left as well. Before he left, he did not forget to kill the demonic Moon sect member, who was still lying on the ground. That's right, the Evil Moon sect member who had attacked Yu Mingqian was still alive, even after being reduced to a pile of bones. Yu Mingqian's vicious methods could be seen. While Yu Mingqian was going to meet the Evil Moon sect, Luo Qingtong was also living in an abyss of suffering. There was no other reason. After she explained to Yi Qianming what hubby meant, the latter took a fancy to this title, and asked her to stop calling him brother and call him hubby. What kind of husband was this? He was a man. Calling him hubby. This scene was simply unbearable to the eyes. However, she couldn't refute Yi Qianming's reason. Didn't you say that was a compliment? Or are you just trying to trick me? Yi Qianming's voice was cold. Chapter 2602. If she admitted it, wouldn't this man think that she was scolding him last night, so she deliberately pinched and pulled him, and deliberately took off his clothes? Luo Qingtong thought so and could only succumb to her own deception. If she knew that this would be the result, even if she was beaten to death, she wouldn't have interpreted the word husband in such a way. At most, Yi Qianming would teach her a lesson. Anyway, he wouldn't do anything to her because her body was similar to Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong's heart was madly biting her handkerchief, but on the surface, she called Yi Qianming weakly husband. Her voice was soft and feeble, without an ounce of strength. But in Yi Qianming's ears, it was unusually pleasing to the ear. The meaning of this title was indeed very different. For some reason, when Yi Qianming heard Luo Qingtong call him like this, his heart inexplicably softened. He only felt that the girl's voice was very pleasant to the ear. In fact, in order to be able to match the identity of Luo Shaoqi, Luo Qingtong deliberately lowered her voice and changed it into a slightly hoarse voice of a teenager. It was completely different from soft and pleasant to the ears. But Yi Qianming felt that it was indescribably pleasant to the ear. Well, call me again. Yi Qianming felt comfortable in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He wore a white jade mask on his face and looked at Luo Qingtong with narrowed eyes. Aren't you praising me? I can't hear it clearly in my dream. I think you can call me a few more times during the day. Luo Qingtong really cursed in her heart. She even suspected that Yi Qianming was deliberately messing with her. Did this man find out that her previous explanation was completely fooling him? Luo Qingtong thought so and instantly felt a toothache. But she couldn't expose Yi Qianming. After all, she was the one who fooled Yi Qianming first. If she exposed him, wouldn't she be giving Yi Qianming something that could be used against her? At that time, the other party would have a chance to deal with her. Luo Qingtong thought so and instantly decided to give up the righteousness for the sake of the greater good. Anyway, Yi Qianming and the others didn't know what the word husband meant. She could call him that. Anyway, in the end, she wouldn't be the one who would be embarrassed. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong called him husband a few times. In the end, the more she called him husband, the smoother it got. She almost called him husband. When Yi Qianming heard her calling him husband again and again, his eyes behind the mask couldn't help but soften. This woman, if only she was so obedient when she was by his side. Usually, she was used to putting on an act, but when it came to tricking people, she became obedient in all kinds of ways. Yi Qianming for a while. Then, when Luo Qingtong was resting, he said calmly, "Yes, thank you for the compliment." When he said this, his thin lips suddenly hooked up. Then he narrowed his eyes and said to Luo Qingtong word by word, "Old woman." When he said this, Luo Qingtong, who was taking a breath, was caught off guard and almost choked to death on her own saliva. Cough, cough, cough. She coughed violently and stared at Yi Qianming. Did this damned man even know what the word wife meant? He actually called her wife. She was Luo Shaoqi. Brother, you can't call her wife so casually. Chapter 2603. It doesn't matter. Yi Qianming looked indifferent. Since husband is a compliment, wife should be the same, right? Of course, I don't know how to explain the word wife, but obviously Luo Xiaoqi, you know it, right? Yi Qianming snorted and looked at Luo Qingtong. For some reason, Luo Qingtong inexplicably heard joy from his words. Did this man think that wife was a curse word? Did he want to get back at her for what happened last night? Silly man, you've sold yourself. Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianming's twitching lips and didn't know what to say. Forget it, let him be happy. Alas, it was all because she cheated him. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a thing at all. Luo Qingtong thought so and felt powerless in an instant. She scratched the wall in her heart and then said with twitching lips, "Brother, as long as you are happy." What else was there to say about her man? Of course, she had to pamper him even if she had to kneel down. Who asked her to cheat him first? But even if this man wanted to get back at her, he had to understand the matter clearly first. Wasn't this sending herself to him to be molested? Fortunately, he called her wife. If he called someone else, that scene was too beautiful. She didn't dare to look at it. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched and her heart was extremely tangled. How could she tell Yi Qianming that the word wife wasn't a curse word? It wasn't the word husband either. Damn it. Just when she was feeling depressed, Yi Qianming's heart was particularly comfortable. These two words were indeed very different. How long had it been since he saw Luo Qingtong change her expression so much? This woman deserved to be taught a lesson. Yi Qianming's heart was happy. Looking at the obvious depression on Luo Qingtong's face, he immediately turned and left. By the way, his words swept over Luo Qingtong from behind. The clothes that you said you would mend for me, mend as soon as possible. I'll wait. After hearing Yi Qianming's words, Luo Qingtong was even more certain that he was trying to get back at her for what happened last night. Supplement my ass. Luo Qingtong had a toothache when she thought of that stupid dress. Previously, she had taken it out with great ambition and said that after it was repaired, she would be able to gain Yi Qianming's favor. In the end, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched at the thought of the sleeve that had been pricked by her like a hornet. Was it too late to pretend that he didn't hear anything? However, it was clear that Yi Qianming knew her very well. Give it to me this evening. Otherwise. Yi Qianming didn't finish his words, but Luo Qingtong already knew the consequences. In short, this man would not let her off so easily. God knows if he would grab her and force her to mend his clothes on the spot. At that time, she could forget about getting any better. One by one he would make up for it until he died. That man had said before that if she didn't mend it well, he still had a lot of clothes. Luo Qingtong originally thought that she could move out of Yi Qianming's tent tonight and live somewhere else. After all, there were no more mosquitoes. She even took off his clothes. No matter how she looked at it, it was impossible for her to live in his tent anymore. But in the end, this happened again. Luo Qingtong's heart was filled with tears. She gloomily took out the clothes from her storage ring and stared blankly at the holes that she had made. Damn it, the more you mend, the worse it gets. How was she going to tell Yi Qianming? Chapter 2604. Not far away, Bei Qing and Feng Yu, who had heard the conversation between Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, looked very excited. Mending clothes? The evil doctor? Before they knew that Luo Qingtong was Luo Shaoqi, they didn't think it was a big deal to ask her to mend clothes. But now that they knew that Luo Qingtong was Luo Shaoqi, they felt very uneasy. With the evil doctor's character, they had no doubt that she would kill decisively and endlessly cheat people. But mending clothes? The corners of their lips twitched, and then they secretly looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong. When they saw the clothes in her hand, whose sleeves were no longer visible, the two of them looked as if they had been struck by lightning, but also felt that it was just as they had expected. Oh my God! She poked the sleeves like that. If Bei Qing and Feng Yu didn't know that Luo Qingtong was Luo Shaoqi, they would have thought that she had a grudge against their master, and wanted to poke the clothes as if they were their master. The two of them covered their faces, and their expressions were even more hopeless than Luo Qingtong's. Great! The evil doctor's mending skills were so terrible that they couldn't bear to look at it. What would she give to their master later? By then their master would have another chance to bully the evil doctor. Master, you have to take it easy, Don't accidentally go overboard. By then, when you and the evil doctor have a conflict, we will be the unlucky ones. The two of them were indescribably hopeless, but Luo Qingtong didn't feel it at all. At this moment, she was looking at the clothes in her hand with a frown. Looking at the sleeves that had almost been poked to death by her, she really felt a twinge of pain in her heart. Why was this needlework so difficult? When she used the threads of the 1,000 silkworms to deal with the enemies, she was simply invincible. Those strong guards in the human martial arts realm couldn't even think about getting close to her. But when it came to this place, it was also needlework, but the mending of clothes was so difficult, so difficult. Luo Qingtong's eyes widened. Her blood-red eyes had clearly seen how the threads should be threaded, but when she started to move her hands and the threads didn't listen to her. The stitches were also crooked. Luo Qingtong had no choice but to tear and poke again and again. And then it became like this. If Luo Qingtong didn't have her blood-red eyes and dodge in time, her 10 fingers might have been poked into pieces together with the sleeves. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong suddenly looked at the clothes in her hand gloomily. All of a sudden, her eyes lit up and she smiled. I've got it. She smiled as she looked at the clothes in her hands. Then she hugged it and walked back into the tent. Looking at her leaving figure, Bei Qing and Feng Yu felt a headache coming on. What idea did the evil doctor come up with this idea? Every time they watched their master and the evil doctor fight, they felt so tired. Having two masters who were so naughty, their hearts were bitter. Bei Qing and Feng Yu's expressions were very interesting. They couldn't help but pray that the two of them wouldn't go overboard. Their hearts were too weak and couldn't withstand too much stimulation. While Bei Qing and Feng Yu were praying in the tent. Chapter 2605. That woman definitely didn't expect him to do this, right? Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. He was already looking forward to Luo Qingtong's expression when she came back at night. He wondered what that woman would do at that time. Would she come to him pitifully and beg him? Yi Qianming chuckled. He finally knew why Luo Qingtong was so naughty in the past. This feeling was not bad at all. Especially when he looked at Luo Qingtong. He felt depressed but he couldn't do anything to her. Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. The smile on his lips was getting bigger and bigger. At this moment, Luo Qingtong excitedly hugged the clothes in her hands and walked in from outside. Cough, brother, I've mended your clothes. She deliberately emphasized the word mended. Luo Qingtong's face was full of smiles and she was very happy. Yi Qianming looked at the smile on her face and suddenly raised his eyebrows. So fast. His expression was indifferent, and at the same time, he was a little curious. Didn't those people from the Red Flame mercenary group clearly say that this woman didn't know how to mend clothes? How could it be mended so quickly? Let me have a look. Looking at the bright smile on the young man's face that even the huge birthmark couldn't hide, Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows and reached out his hand to Luo Qingtong. Okay. Luo Qingtong said and handed the clothes in her hands to Yi Qianming with a smile. Yi Qianming unfolded the clothes in his hands and looked at the sleeves that were almost poked into a sieve. He was silent for a while. You've mended it? The fate of this sleeve was simply too tragic. But Yi Qianming noticed the clothes in his hands that were still separated from the sleeves. This woman just gave it to him like this. Was she trying to renege on her promise? Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows slightly and snorted coldly as he looked at Luo Qingtong. Of course not. This way it's mended. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she reached out and cut the other sleeve of the shirt in Yi Qianming's hand symmetrically. This time, the two sleeves of the robe were cut short. When Luo Qingtong made her move, she didn't forget to cut off the part of the other sleeve that was torn by her. Both sleeves would be the same short. Yi Qianming looked at the clothes that had suddenly changed from a long robe to a short robe. However, because the style of the clothes did not match, it looked neither fish nor fowl. The veins on his forehead throbbed. This woman. Is this what you mean by mending? He gritted his teeth. She had cut off the sleeves of his robe, leaving his arms bare. Was this considered mending? Yeah. Luo Qingtong looked at him with a smile, and said with a sly and proud face, You didn't say what you wanted. What do you think? I even helped you change the style of your robe. Is it okay to make it like this? Brother, I'm very sincere. As Luo Qingtong said this, the smile on her face became more cheerful. She was truly a genius. Who said that mending clothes could only be done by sewing? She had cut off the sleeves on both sides and changed it into another style of clothing. It was considered mending. This was a good idea that Luo Qingtong had thought for a long time just now. At this moment, she felt a burst of joy in her heart and looked at Yi Qianming with a happy face. Yi Qianming looked at her proud and sly expression and really tried to restrain himself. In the end, he couldn't help but pull her into his arms. Chapter 2606. He gritted his teeth and said word by word. He was almost angered to death by Luo Qingtong. But soon he seemed to have thought of something and his lips curled up. Then he looked at her and snorted. Since you've done so well, I'm not a stingy person. Let's forget about what happened last night. You can continue to stay here tonight. When Yi Qianming said this, Luo Qingtong almost choked on her own saliva. What? She looked at Yi Qianming with a dumbfounded expression. She didn't expect things to develop like this. She had solved the problem of the clothes. Shouldn't she not have to stay here tonight and continue to sew clothes? Why didn't this man play his cards according to the rules? Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. He was even happier with Luo Qingtong's dumbfounded expression. He let this woman be so proud. He finally shot himself in the foot, didn't he? Yi Qianming suddenly had a flash of inspiration and thought of such a reason. It seemed that the effect was surprisingly good. He snorted and looked at Luo Qingtong's expression. What? You don't want to? Do you feel that your clothes aren't mended well? Yi Qianming put emphasis on the word, not good, and paused. He raised his eyebrows and snorted. Since that's the case, then you can continue to mend clothes. In short, she could choose between mending clothes and sleeping. When Yi Qianming said this, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. Damn, when did Yi Qianming become so difficult to deal with? Luo Qingtong listened to his words and really couldn't refute. In short, no matter what, she still had to stay here tonight. Luo Qingtong deeply suspected that Yi Qianming was doing this because of last night. No, it was very likely that he was taking revenge on her for what happened last night. Otherwise, why would he suddenly ask her to sew clothes? After she found a way to get away with it, he didn't let her have an easy time, and asked her to continue to stay in this tent. Luo Qingtong didn't believe that Yi Qianming didn't see that she wanted to leave here and sleep elsewhere. F***ck, he had really shot himself in the foot. If he had known earlier, Luo Qingtong had known this for a long time, but she didn't know where to start. He had done too many bad things in the past. Was this his retribution? Luo Qingtong was really speechless. She was the first person in history to have been tricked by him so miserably. I got it, she mumbled. She was already thinking about what she should do to make herself more obedient tonight. She really couldn't stand the stimulation of sleepwalking and molesting Yi Qianming every night after she fell asleep. She was hiding her identity. Did his body have to be so unreliable? If this continued, She really wouldn't be able to hide her identity no matter how powerful she was. She really didn't want Yi Qianming to know her identity on this abandoned continent for the time being. Luo Qingtong's heart was tangled. However, Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. He was already thinking about how he should let this woman molest him tonight. Should he continue to leave kiss marks or let this woman tear his clothes? Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy and the curve of his lips became even wider. While he and Luo Qingtong were having a battle of wits and courage, having fun, a few days later, boom! Chapter 2607. Along with this violent explosion in the distant sky, there was a lot of hustle and bustle, as well as a thick cloud of smoke. The smoke swept away the decaying spiritual qi in the sky above the abandoned continent. The boiling and roaring aura revealed absolute vitality and incomparable power. It's the power of the heart of the continent. Chu Xiaofeng and the others rushed out of their tents when they sensed the rising power. Yi Qianxian also appeared in the sky above their tents. He looked at the center of the rising power in front of him. That was where the heart of the continent stopped and opened this time. This vigorous and powerful power was the remnant power of the great Tao left behind by the heart of the continent. It was precisely because of this vigorous force that this continent, which should have been abandoned, was able to nurture the Tianluo grass again. The other withered and corroded spiritual herbs were able to radiate new vitality. Master, this power seems to be very different from the rest. Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others appeared beside Yi Qianxian and whispered to him. Since all abandoned continents were already decaying and were about to die, the remaining power in the heart of the continent would definitely not be this strong. After all, it was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If there were no special circumstances, the final outcome of those abandoned continents that had already reached the end of their road, without exception, would be the complete exhaustion of the vitality in the heart of the continent. Then they would disintegrate in the starry sky, turning into dust and air. However, the power emitted by the heart of the continent was unusually tyrannical and powerful. It was hard to believe that this was an abandoned continent that was about to disintegrate and scatter into the starry sky just by looking at the intense power of the continent's core. Instead, it seemed like a supercontinent that was at its peak, filled with vitality, and was about to evolve and evolve again. Yes, that's indeed the case. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes. He looked at the heart of the continent. The power of the heart of the continent gave him a completely different feeling. This was not a power that the heart of the continent, which was about to die, could possess. There must have been something that they had not expected to happen in the process. He didn't expect that he would encounter such a situation when he came to the abandoned continent to get a stalk of Tianluo grass to stabilize his injuries, because he couldn't find Luo Qingtong. The thing in the heart of the continent was definitely not simple. This trip to the sky Luo grass would not be so easy. However, Yi Qianxian wasn't particularly worried. At worst, he would just reveal his true identity and strength. To Yi Qianxian, the reason why he had concealed his identity in every possible way was not because he was afraid that the people of Tiandu would come looking for him. Instead, he didn't want them to cause trouble on his way to find Luo Qingtong. Moreover, if he was busy dealing with them, how would he have enough time to look for Luo Qingtong? There was also the hidden danger of his heavenly veins body, which was indeed troublesome. But that was all there was to it. Now that Luo Qingtong was by his side, he was not afraid of the people from Tiandu. As long as Luo Qingtong could cure the hidden danger in his body, even if Emperor Tiandu came, he would not be afraid. Chapter 2608. He would let that woman misunderstand him for the time being. Yi Qianxian really liked how Luo Qingtong cared about him and protected him. It warmed his heart. Moreover, that woman was so cunning and willful. She was Luo Shaoqi, so she was unusually obedient because she didn't want to expose her identity. Yi Qianxian hadn't had his fill yet. How could he let her know the truth so soon? His face darkened when he thought of how she used to make him jump in anger, but he couldn't bear to punish her. This time, it was time for him to collect some interest and gain back some face. As Yi Qianren thought about it, she snorted and turned to look at Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong was also looking at the scene in the sky. The power of the heart of the continent was rising. Luo Qingtong wasn't as strong as Yi Qianxian and the others, who could see that the power of the heart of the continent was different at a glance. However, her blood-red eyes were spinning. She could tell that something was wrong from the analysis of the power. The power of the heart of the continent was too strong. It was far more powerful than the power of the heart of the continent emitted by ordinary abandoned continents. The heart of the continent was so powerful. Could it be that there was some kind of treasure hidden in the heart of the continent that caused such a change? If that was the case, then their group had really made the right choice by coming here. Luo Qingtong knew that if there was really such a treasure that could make the heart of the continent, which was about to die, emit such a terrifying power, then its value was far beyond ordinary treasures. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if news of this treasure were to spread, not to mention the Chu family and the Lian family, even the big families and forces of the three-star domain and above would come. However, the Heavenly Wind Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan had coincidentally sealed off the news of this abandoned continent, so no one else knew about it. This treasure would most likely be theirs to take advantage of. Luo Qingtong's lips curled up at this thought. But soon, she saw Yi Qianxian's gaze and the smile on her face immediately disappeared. Oh my God! She did not know how to face Yi Qianxian anymore. These days, Luo Qingtong had been living in an abyss of suffering. Her sleepwalking was so bad that it made people's hair stand on end. Luo Qingtong woke up every morning in Yi Qianxian's arms. There was even one time when she tied her hands and feet together. When she finally woke up, Luo Qingtong was horrified. Her lips were less than a centimeter away from Yi Qianxian's lips. She was so close to kissing him. Oh my God! Was she that thirsty? Yi Qianxian, on the other hand, coldly told her that she had suddenly woken up in the middle of the night and said that she wanted to bite him to death. The man narrowed his eyes. I was curious how you were going to bite me to death. In the end you woke up. Yi Qianxian's voice was calm, but Luo Qingtong felt like dying. Oh my God! This bite was not a bite at all. Luo Qingtong was certain that if she hadn't woken up in time, she would have pounced on Yi Qianxian and bitten him left and right. Oh my God! Even with her hands and feet tied, she couldn't stop herself from defying the heavens. Chapter 2609. Luo Qingtong's heart was indescribably tangled, but she didn't notice that Yi Qianxian's eyes were dark as he stared at Luo Qingtong's slightly swollen lips. This woman woke up faster than he expected. Fortunately, he pulled away in time and made up an excuse. Otherwise, they would have been discovered. In the next few days, no matter how many methods Luo Qingtong thought of, even if she desperately wanted to move out of Yi Qianxian's tent and stay in her own tent, when she finally woke up, she would still appear in Yi Qianxian's tent. This time, it was even more outrageous. She directly slept on Yi Qianxian's body. On his body. Meeting Luo Qingtong's shocked gaze, Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent, and his tone was indescribably innocent. I was sleeping well in the tent, and you ran back on your own. You still insisted on sleeping in my tent. There weren't enough beds, so you climbed up on your own. You even cried and pulled, and refused to leave no matter what. As Yi Qianxian spoke, he raised his hand and pointed to the two sides of the wooden bed, where Luo Qingtong's fingers had left fingerprints due to excessive force. Looking at the 10 fingerprints that fit perfectly with her fingers, Luo Qingtong was on the verge of breaking down. She actually ran back to Yi Qianxian's tent, cried and pulled, and refused to leave? Luo Qingtong completely couldn't imagine that she would do such a thing. But the truth was right in front of her eyes. These 10 fingerprints were clearly her own, and she appeared in Yi Qianxian's tent. It couldn't be that Yi Qianxian carried her over, right? In fact, it really was like this. After Luo Qingtong fell asleep, Yi Qianxian carried her over. After being together for so long, Luo Qingtong had long been accustomed to Yi Qianxian's embrace. So when Yi Qianxian picked her up, not only did she not wake up at all, but she also snuggled into the man's embrace to make him more comfortable. The 10 fingerprints on the wooden bed were also pressed by Yi Qianxian when he held her hand. With his strength, it would be a piece of cake for him to leave these 10 fingerprints on Luo Qingtong's hand. There wouldn't be any leakage of energy or aura to wake Luo Qingtong up. After doing all this, he was satisfied and fell asleep with Luo Qingtong in his arms. As for the wooden bed that had suddenly become narrow, he had asked Bei Qing and Feng Yu to redo it. After all, Luo Qingtong was no longer sleeping here. The bed didn't need to be so big, right? As for Luo Qingtong running back to sleep with him, he didn't know at all. Yi Qianxian had planned everything so that Luo Qingtong could leave the tent to sleep elsewhere. Luo Qingtong didn't know anything. She had always thought that Yi Qianxian didn't discover her identity. Naturally, she didn't think that Yi Qianxian had plotted against her. She thought that it was her own fault. After all, she did want to get close to Yi Qianxian, so she tried every possible way to live in his tent. She completely believed that she would do something to Yi Qianxian after she fell asleep. If that wasn't the case with Luo Qingtong's scheming mind, how could she have fallen into Yi Qianxian's trap? As the saying goes, those closely involved can't see clearly. This time, Luo Qingtong had fallen into Yi Qianxian's trap. At this moment, when she saw the man looking at her, she suddenly looked up at the sky and pretended that she didn't know anything. Last night, she had almost torn Yi Qianxian's clothes. Chapter 26:10. Last time, when she'd failed to kiss him, Yi Qianxian had found an excuse for her to bite him to death. This time she'd failed to tear his clothes. Could it be that she wanted to freeze him to death? Luo Qingtong felt that such a retarded excuse wasn't something that Yi Qianxian would believe. Even she couldn't bring herself to say it. It was an insult to her intelligence. Just as she was feeling depressed and conflicted, Chu Yuqing and the others saw the storm of energy in the sky, and were pleasantly surprised. Haha, the heart of the continent has opened, and the heavenly grass has appeared. This heavenly grass will definitely be ours. Chu Yuqing and the others felt an indescribable sense of certainty. But soon his expression turned ugly again. It's a pity that we didn't get rid of that bastard Chu Lingfeng before this heavenly grass appeared. Otherwise we would have one less major problem in the fight for this heavenly grass. But it's good that he's not dead. Chu Yuqing sneered. Even if Chu Lingfeng had told them that he'd tried to assassinate Chu Lingfeng, no one would have believed him. And even if someone did, so what? There was no evidence, and there were no clan elders present on this abandoned continent. It was impossible for Chu Lingfeng to cause trouble for him. All he had to do was kill him in the fight for this heavenly grass. And in the fight for this heavenly grass, crooks and honest folk would be mixed together. There would be both the Chu clan and the Lian clan. As the #1 member of the Tianfeng Chu clan, Chu Lingfeng was bound to be targeted by the opposing Lian clan. When the time came, Chu Yuqing would join forces with others to make a move against him. Perhaps Chu Lingfeng would take care of the Lian clan for them, and then die at their hands. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? Killing two birds with one stone. As Chu Yuqing thought this, he felt very pleased with himself. Quite a few members of the Tianfeng Chu clan had already gathered around him. Among them were the top members of the 6th Elders and 9th Elders factions. They had no choice. First, the 6th Elders and 3rd Elders factions were on good terms. Second, Chu Tianming had participated in the operation against Luo Qingtong. Not only that, but when Chu Yuqing had ambushed Chu Lingfeng, they'd been nearby as well. Under these circumstances, the 6th Elders faction had no way to extricate themselves from this matter. They said that this matter had nothing to do with them, so they could only cooperate with Chu Yuqing. As for the 9th Elders people, they were on good terms with Madame Xing, and had long been secretly siding with Bai Xing. This time, they had received Bai Xing's orders to help Chu Yuqing in secret. Now that Chu Yuqing's ambush had failed, and Chu Yufei had also been caught up in it, they had no choice but to act. No matter what, he could not let Chu Lingfeng leave the abandoned continent alive. In addition, Chu Yuqing had also contacted the two ambitious elder bloodlines of the two families. At this point, more than half of the Tianfeng Chu clan's 9 great elder clans were on Chu Yuqing's side. Chu Yuqing had originally thought that with this lineup, finding and killing Chu Lingfeng wouldn't be a problem at all. But who would have thought that Chu Lingfeng would evaporate from the abandoned continent in the past few days? No one could find even a shadow of him. He'd clearly been seriously injured, and his bloodline power had been exhausted. Even if it was to recover his strength, he should have come out to find a way. But in the end, there was no news of him at all. Who knew where the hell he was hiding? Chapter 26:11. Not to mention snatching the Tianluo grass from them. It was fine if he didn't show up. Wouldn't it be easier to kill him after they obtained the Tianluo grass? In short, they couldn't let him leave this abandoned continent no matter what. While Chu Yuqing and the others were overjoyed, Zhang Beiyue and the others had already sensed the heart of the continent's trembling. Young master, the heart of the continent's energy tide is erupting. The heart of the continent has opened. The group of people were conserving their energy. Hearing this, Zhang Beiyue's tightly shut eyes opened immediately. Get ready. Once the energy tide is over, we'll head to the heart of the continent immediately. He didn't care about the Tianluo grass. Geniuses like Zhang Beiyue had already gotten the chance to consume the Tianluo grass. After all, although it was rare, it wasn't so rare that it was hard to find. As a powerful family in the 3-star Great Heaven domain, it wasn't difficult for the Zhang family to obtain a few Tianluo grass. However, the opportunity to obtain the primordial divine item was hard to come by. The Zhang family had only gotten a few words by chance. They guessed that the primordial divine item might exist on this abandoned continent, but they couldn't be completely sure. In order not to alert the enemy, they had sent the most elite geniuses of the family. Otherwise, given the Zhang family's strength, they could easily flatten the entire flying star field. Why would they only send a few people? It was just a cover-up. Zhang Beiyue and the others had been guarding this abandoned continent for more than half a year. Now that the heart of the continent had opened, they couldn't miss it. When Zhang Beiyue gave the order, the people of the demonic moon sect had also sensed the trembling of the heart of the continent. They were instantly overjoyed. The heart of the continent has opened. I wonder if the primordial divine item's existence is real. Their gazes were drooling as they looked at the place where the energy tide had erupted. Their greed was unspeakable. However, when they thought of Yu Mingxuan's unfathomable methods, their expressions froze. Given Yu Mingxian's methods, if he wanted this ancient divine object, they wouldn't even have a share in it. During this time, everyone had fully experienced Yu Mingxuan's methods. The elixirs he had given them, and the inscription patterns he had drawn on their bodies were extremely useful. Everyone's strength had completely recovered. Not only that, because of the existence of the inscription patterns, their strength had increased by quite a bit. The same amount of strength had increased by many times through the inscription patterns on their bodies. Feeling that they were displaying strength that was completely beyond their own, everyone felt an indescribable excitement in their hearts. At the same time, they feared Yu Mingxian. However, they were extremely unwilling to give up on the primordial divine object just like that. Boss, do you think that after we capture that young man, we can use him to threaten that person and force him to give up that ancient divine object? Will he be willing to do so? A demonic moon sect member said to the leader beside him. The latter's face turned grave for a moment, but soon he began to laugh coldly. B. Chapter 26:12. The leader of the evil moon sect was very pleased with himself as he said this. If the news about the ancient divine object was fake, then they would obediently work for Yu Mingquan and capture that young man and hand him over to him. However, if the ancient divine object was real, then they would use that young man's life to threaten the other party. Since the other party had gone through so much trouble just to capture that young man, they would definitely not let him die so easily. Since that was the case, they had room to maneuver. If the other party wanted to use them, then they had to be prepared to be bitten in the back. After all, these people were untrustworthy and unscrupulous people from the evil path. The sneer on the evil moon sect leader's face became even more obvious as he thought about this. On the other side, Yu Mingquan smirked as he shattered the spirit mirror in his hand. A bunch of reckless people. He did not care about these people from the evil moon sect, but the ancient divine object in the heart of the continent. He looked at the energy tide in front of him, which seemed unusually tyrannical and full of vitality. He wanted that ancient divine object, and he also wanted Luo Qingtong. The energy storm in the heart of the continent raged for a full 7 days. During these 7 days, all the decaying spirit energy in the entire abandoned continent had been cleansed. The air was filled with spirit energy that was full of vitality. This was the power of the great path contained in the heart of the continent. Every year, the heart of the continent opened, and the remaining spirit flowers and spirit herbs absorbed this energy tide. By absorbing this energy, they could continue to maintain their vitality and strength in this abandoned continent. The magical beasts and demonic plants that had mutated and could only rely on the decaying spiritual energy to survive also appeared on the ground at this moment, absorbing the rare vitality and energy hungrily. Although they could only rely on the decaying spirit energy to survive, this rare vitality and power was the source of their strength. If they wanted to break through their own boundary barriers, the decaying spirit energy would not be able to do so. Only this energy, which contained the power of the great path, could do so. Therefore, during these 7 days, the sounds of countless demonic beasts and monster plants leveling up could be heard incessantly. There were also sharp and resounding roars from the demonic beasts and monster plants. During these 7 days, Luo Qingtong and the others all left their original campsite and went underground to avoid the demonic beasts and monster plants that rushed up to the surface. Luo Qingtong and the others would be crazy to go against all the demonic beasts and monster plants on the abandoned continent. It would be a small matter if they were attacked by all the demonic beasts and monster plants on the continent. It would be a tragedy if they missed the opportunity to enter the heart of the continent in 7 days. However, as Luo Qingtong looked at the raging energy storm, she felt that this scene was familiar. She thought about this for a long time. Then, she suddenly remembered that in the true Spill continent, when the southern domain had been ravaged by energy storms, it had also been like this. But it was far from being as vast as this. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, her heart skipped a beat. An idea popped up in her mind. However, when she carefully searched for it, she couldn't find it for a while. Her brows were tightly knitted as she kept thinking about this matter. Chapter 26:13. Boom. Outside, the raging tide of energy came to an abrupt end. All the demonic beasts and plants disappeared in an instant. They had absorbed enough vitality and power, so they were all hiding and continuing to refine and break through. Luo Qingtong and the others immediately took action. Let's go to the heart of the continent. Chu Xiaofeng's voice was very excited. The fight for the Tianluo grass this time was the highlight of their trip to the abandoned continent. Now that the dust had settled, it was time for these people to return to their families. Chu Xiaofeng had relied on Luo Qingtong to obtain a large number of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Even during the time they were temporarily stationed here, he had relied on Luo Qingtong's guidance to find a lot of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs nearby. He had also cooperated with Gu Yifeng and the others to kill a lot of demonic beasts and plants. His own strength had been greatly tempered. Under such circumstances, he had achieved all his goals in coming to the abandoned continent. It didn't matter whether he had the Tianluo grass or not. In any case, he had no chance among the top disciples. Even so, he had to go and take a look. After all, it was an important day for the disciples of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Flying Star Lian family to compete. It would be a pity if he didn't go and take a look. However, he didn't know that 2 people in his team were going for the Tianluo grass. In fact, they were aiming for something in the heart of the continent. Brother, let's go. Luo Qingtong didn't care about her previous entanglement with Yi Qianxian. Anyway, this was an urgent matter, and this man wouldn't ask her about trivial matters like sleeping. Yes, that was what Luo Qingtong thought. Otherwise, she would still be in the team of the Red Flame mercenaries. During these 7 days, Luo Qingtong and Ouyang Yingyu were inseparable. At the same time, she finally understood why no one dared to approach Ouyang Yingyu at night. Damn it, he's got 2 personalities. At night, Ouyang Yingyu would become another person. The originally seductive and coquettish woman would turn into a noble and cold woman after dark. She didn't like to talk and would attack anyone who came within 3 feet of her. Even Ouyang Yingyu's weapon was custom-made. During the day, the passionate and coquettish woman wielded a long sword. At night, the long sword would be split into 2, turning into two short blades. When Luo Qingtong approached Ouyang Yingyu on the first night, she was almost stabbed in the heart by the two daggers. If it weren't for her blood pupil's quick reaction and stopping Ouyang Yingyu's attack at the same time, she would have bled at that moment. After dark, Ouyang Yingyu was a natural assassin, as if she lived for the night. Luo Qingtong and Ouyang Yingyu exchanged moves for a whole night. Every time, Ouyang Yingyu only blocked and did not attack. Only then did Ouyang Yingyu acknowledge her. Oh no, it's Ouyang Ningya. That night, after discovering that she couldn't hurt Luo Qingtong no matter what, the cold personality told her her real name. Luo Qingtong knew that Ouyang Yingyu turned out to have a dual personality. Moreover, the personality hidden after dark turned out to be such a bloodthirsty and cold personality. Chapter 26:14. After all, no one wanted to be hunted down with two daggers in the middle of the night, right? Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. As for Yi Qianren, he didn't say anything as he watched her walk towards him. The heart of the continent had been opened. Even if Luo Qingtong didn't walk up to him and leave with him, he would still capture her and imprison her by his side regardless of whether she was willing or not. After all, Luo Qingtong's safety was more important than anything else. Wasn't the reason why he cared about Luo Xiaoqi very simple? He had accepted Luo Qingtong's protection fee during this period of time. Wasn't it his duty to take care of her for those spirit herbs and flowers? Yi Qianxian should really be glad that Luo Qingtong had come up with all sorts of excuses to get close to him. Now that he was taking care of this woman, it wasn't abrupt at all. Yes, come here. Yi Qianxian raised his hand and pulled Luo Qingtong to his side. He resisted the urge to pull her into his arms and protect her. With a wave of his sleeve, Yi Qianxian flew up and headed for the heart of the continent with Chu Xiaofeng and the others. And on the abandoned continent, there were many figures like them who directly rushed over. The members of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan, and the Flying Star Lian clan who had entered the abandoned continent to train and kill the devil beasts and demonic plants, as well as plucking spirit flowers and spirit herbs, all flew into the air and charged towards the heart of the continent with their guards. Especially the top disciples. This time the highlight of the show was them. Of course, they didn't rule out the possibility of others picking up scraps in the chaos. Therefore, the other disciples all rushed to the heart of the continent as well. After the battle for the Tianluo grass came to an end, the competition between the two clans had come to an end. Whoosh! Whoosh! When Luo Qingtong's group arrived at the heart of the continent, there were already some teams waiting there. The two teams were clearly separated, and they stood at the entrance to the heart of the continent, where the surging mist and lingering spiritual qi had yet to dissipate. They stood on guard against each other. They are from the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. Luo Qingtong looked at the people in front of her, who were wearing the Chu clan's uniform. She saw that they were all wearing the same uniform with the word Lian embroidered on their chest. This was the first time that Luo Qingtong had met a member of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan, since she came to the abandoned continent. The Flying Star Lian clan and the Tianfeng Chu clan had entered the abandoned continent from the same place. However, the locations where they landed were all different. From the looks of it, the two clans must have discussed this from the very beginning. During the first few days of training, the disciples of the two clans would not interfere with each other. They would fight again when it was time to fight for the Tianluo grass. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so coincidental that Luo Qingtong's group had run into members of the Chu clan after entering the abandoned continent. The two clans must have divided their activity areas, so that it would be difficult for them to run into each other from the very beginning. When Luo Qingtong looked at the members of the Flying Star Lian clan, the deadlocked crowd heard the whoosh and looked over at Luo Qingtong's group. Chu Xiaofeng. Chapter 26:15. A person who was obviously a top disciple stepped forward and said, "Come over here." His tone was full of superiority and superiority. These top disciples usually wouldn't have any interactions with the disciples below them. The resources and cultivation places they enjoyed were all of the best. They weren't in the same place as Chu Xiaofeng and the others at all. The reason why they stopped Chu Xiaofeng and the others was that they were going to fight against the Flying Star Lien family. The people of the Tianfeng Chu family naturally had to gather together. Luo Qingtong looked at the top disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family. Chu Xiaofeng's voice rang in her ears. Little 7, this person is the top disciple of the second elder of the Tianfeng Chu family, Chu Qiankong. The top disciple beside him is the top disciple of the first elder's line, Chu Yuanhong. These two people won't participate in the competition for the successor of the family head. They have no conflict with us. Let's go over first. Chu Xiaofeng first explained the identities of these two people to Luo Qingtong to prevent any conflict between them and Luo Qingtong. The first elder and second elder's line had always been the protectors of the Tianfeng Chu family. Their successor would enter the elder council and directly become an elder of the family. They wouldn't participate in the competition for the family head. There was no conflict of interest with the eighth elder's line, which was the protector of the family head. Chu Xiaofeng had been worried that after arriving here, he would first encounter the third elder's line or the sixth elder's line. If that happened, it would be another troublesome matter. After all, Chu Tianming, Chu Ku'er, and the others had suffered a great loss at their hands. Especially Luo Qingtong. He wasn't afraid of Chu Ku'er and Chu Tianming causing trouble. The eighth elder's line wasn't without people. However, Luo Qingtong was a mercenary. He might not be able to protect her. Hence, Chu Xiaofeng heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the people here were from the first elder and second elder's side. At the same time, he also informed Luo Qingtong about the situation of these two families, so that she would know what to do. In fact, the current situation was very advantageous for Luo Qingtong. No matter how one looked at it, if the Heavenly Wind Chu clan wanted to fight against the Flying Star Lien clan, they had to be united. Under such circumstances, if Chu Ku'er and the others came to cause trouble for Luo Qingtong, the others would stop them. As Chu Xiaofeng thought of this, he immediately led Luo Qingtong and the others towards where Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong were. When Chu Qiankong saw Chu Xiaofeng and the others approaching, he turned his head and ignored them. For top disciples like them, if it weren't for the fact that they needed to fight against the Flying Star Lien clan, he wouldn't even look at Chu Xiaofeng and the others, let alone speak to them. However, the Flying Star Lien clan's people took another look at Chu Xiaofeng and the others. Or rather, they were looking at Luo Qingtong. Chu Qiankong and the others didn't notice, but they could see that Chu Xiaofeng and the others were a little strange. The people of the Red Flame Mercenary Corps and the others were protecting Chu Xiaofeng, but Bei Qing, Fengyu, and the others were protecting Luo Qingtong tightly. Not only that, even Chu Xiaofeng's subconscious actions just now seemed to be treating Luo Qingtong as the backbone of the group. Chapter 26:16. He didn't know if it was just his imagination, but he felt that this group of white-masked men wasn't simple. This man wore a silver robe with fragmentary gold stars. It was the standard uniform of the Flying Star Lien family's top disciples. Not only that, but he was also surrounded by a group of top disciples. It was obvious that he was their leader. While this man's gaze was on Luo Qingtong and the others, on the other side, the sound of rushing wind could be heard. Chu Yuqing and the others had arrived. Bastard, it's you. Chu Yuqing and the other top disciples arrived. When he saw Luo Qingtong and Chu Xiaofeng's group, his eyes instantly turned red. With a whoosh, he launched an attack at Luo Qingtong. However, before his attack could reach Luo Qingtong, Bei Qing, Fengyu, and the others blocked it. Seeing his attack disappear in midair, Chu Yuqing was furious. He prepared to continue attacking Luo Qingtong. At the same time, he ordered the guards behind him to attack Luo Qingtong as well. At that moment, Chu Xiaofeng stepped in front of Luo Qingtong. Chu Yuqing, what are you doing? Chu Xiaofeng glared at Chu Yuqing. He glanced at Chu Tianming, Chu Ku'er, and the others behind him. Thinking that Chu Yuqing wanted to avenge Chu Ku'er and the others, he immediately shouted, Luo Xiaoqi is my guard. Chu Yuqing, even if you want to avenge Chu Ku'er and the others, you should look at the situation first. Our eighth elder's faction won't let others bully us without retaliating. Chu Xiaofeng's voice rang out. Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong immediately frowned and turned to look in his direction. What's going on? Chu Qiankong's expression was displeased. The Flying Star Lien family was watching, but his own family was having an internal conflict. They couldn't afford to lose face like that. It's Chu Yucheng. He wants to attack my mercenaries. It seems that the Third Elder's faction doesn't like our Eighth Elder's faction. That's why their top disciples want to personally take action and vent their anger on my subordinates. Chu Xiaofeng was the first to answer. He was striking first to gain the initiative. He directly elevated Chu Yucheng's matter to the grudge between the Eighth Elder and Third Elder's factions. In any case, everyone knew of his conflict with Chu Ke. Not only that, but when they were outside, the Eighth Elder's faction and the Third Elder's faction's faction. What was he afraid of? Luo Qingtong had helped him so much along the way, so it was only right for him to help her. You. Chu Xiaofeng's Chu Yucheng was furious. Chu SST. Otherwise, don't blame me for making you beg for death in the future. STSS, but at a time like this, he absolutely couldn't reveal that he'd tried to kill Chu Lingfeng in front of everyone. He also couldn't use this as a reason to attack Luo Qingtong. But he wouldn't let Luo Qingtong off so easily. It was this youth who'd appeared out of nowhere, relying on his strange thread-like martial arts, who'd prevented him from attacking Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, given that fool's scheming, he'd have long since fallen into his hands and been killed by him. This youth, Chu Yucheng, had long since learned of Luo Qingtong's identity from Chu Kuer and the others. He hadn't expected that she'd actually dare to appear in front of them. He swept his gaze over the group and didn't see Chu Lingfeng's figure. He immediately calmed down. With Chu Lingfeng's injuries, he was probably still struggling at death's door, right? Chapter 26:17. Beside Luo Qingtong, Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes at Chu Yucheng's words. He coldly glanced at Chu Yucheng, the light in his eyes exceptionally frigid. Make his woman suffer a fate worse than death? This Chu Yucheng really dared to say such things. He was going to wait here and see how he was going to make his woman suffer a fate worse than death. Yi Qianxian's gaze was icy. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others looked at Chu Yucheng as if they were looking at a dead man. When Chu Xiaofeng heard Chu Yucheng's words, he too was enraged. Listen carefully, the two of you. It's someone from the Third Elder's faction who insists on making trouble for the Eighth Elder's faction. He spoke with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron. When Chu Qiankong and the others heard this, they immediately frowned and looked at Chu Yucheng. They said in a low voice, Chu Yucheng is just a mercenary. Why do you have to make things so ugly here? As he spoke, he glanced discreetly at the Lien family. His meaning was clear. He wanted Chu Yucheng to consider the bigger picture. But Luo Qingtong had ruined Chu Yucheng's plans. How could he let her off so easily? Besides, he needed her to find out Chu Lingfeng's whereabouts. Only then would he be able to find Chu Lingfeng as quickly as possible after the fight for the Skynet grass and kill him. That way, he wouldn't be able to tell the family elders that he'd ambushed and killed him. Thus, he completely ignored Chu Qiankong's hints. You said it yourself. She's just a mercenary. So I don't have the right to punish her? Chu Yucheng sneered, his expression overbearing. You don't need to persuade me. Unless she comes out of her own accord and surrenders herself, don't blame me for taking action. If you have the time to persuade me, why don't you tell Chu Xiaofeng to get lost? Otherwise, if I hurt him and make a fool of myself, I won't care. Chu Yucheng's voice was icy. It could be seen that he was determined to make a move against Luo Qingtong. He did not even give face to Chu Qiankong and the others. Both sides were top-notch disciples. If a fight broke out, the situation would be even uglier. As Chu Qiankong and the others thought of this, they immediately frowned. They looked at Chu Yucheng, then turned to Chu Xiaofeng and said, Have your people leave. Their intentions were very clear. They wanted Chu Xiaofeng to ignore Luo Qingtong and let her go out to help Chu Yucheng vent his anger. After all, he was just a mercenary. There was no need for him to cause internal strife in the Tianfeng Chu clan and become a joke to others. Chu Xiaofeng's expression instantly sank when he heard what Chu Qiankong and the others said. This is impossible, he said in a deep voice. Have Luo Qingtong go out and help Chu Yucheng vent his anger? He could not do such a cowardly thing. Moreover, the reason why Luo Qingtong had offended Chu Kuo was also because of him. How could he not care about Luo Qingtong? As Chu Xiaofeng thought of this, he immediately said coldly to Chu Qiankong and the others, "It's clearly third elder's people who are causing trouble for eighth elder's people. Yet you want me to hand over my people? If I do as you say, how can eighth elder's people raise their heads in the Tianfeng Chu clan in the future? You don't need to say anything else," Chu Xiaofeng said in a deep voice. Chu Xiaofeng said in a deep voice, "Since you two can't uphold justice for our eighth elder's people, then I won't force you. But you want me to hand over my people? Absolutely impossible." Chapter 26:18. Chu Xiaofeng, you don't know what's good for you. Your people offended a top disciple. We're helping you by asking you to hand her over. Since you're so ungrateful, then you'll be in trouble with her. Get out of the way. Chu Qiankong's voice was icy cold. These top disciples didn't care about the disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan in the first place. If it had been one of the top disciples of the eighth elder who spoke, they might have interfered with Chu Yuqing to prevent the situation from becoming too ugly. But who did Chu Xiaofeng think he was? It was already good enough that they were willing to let him hand over Luo Xiaoqi. Since he didn't want to, then he'd be in trouble with Luo Xiaoqi. She dared to oppose a top disciple. If it weren't for the fact that they were on the abandoned continent, and the Lian family didn't want to make a fool of themselves, they would have dealt with Luo Qingtong themselves. Chu Yuqing didn't even need to do anything. Who asked her, as the lowest mercenary, to dare to go against a top disciple? The dignity of a top disciple wasn't to be blasphemed. Chu Qiankong's words immediately caused the disciples of the first elders and second elders factions to all take a step back, allowing Chu Xiaofeng and the others to face Chu Yuqing and the others on their own. But unexpectedly, the mercenaries behind those disciples didn't retreat. They glanced hesitantly at Luo Qingtong and Chu Qiankong's group, then gritted their teeth and stood behind Luo Qingtong. "My apologies, young masters. Luo Xiaoqi has done us a great favor. We're definitely on her side this time." It wasn't that the mercenaries didn't fear the Tianfeng Chu clan, but Luo Qingtong had helped them a lot. Besides, wasn't Chu Xiaofeng in Luo Qingtong's group? They weren't completely opposed to the Tianfeng Chu clan. If they didn't stand up now, they were afraid they'd never be able to live with themselves. The group of mercenaries all lived by licking blood from the edge of the blade. In this life, there was nothing that could be ignored except for friendship. In this abandoned continent, they had received great kindness from Luo Qingtong, and obtained a lot of information about this abandoned continent. Not to mention, Luo Qingtong had provided them with some plans and methods to complete missions in Mercenary City, which had greatly reduced their casualties. If Luo Qingtong only offended the Tianfeng Chu family, they might not stand up for their own interests. But now, Chu Yuqing clearly wasn't going to let Luo Qingtong off. Under such circumstances, everyone had to stand up and support her no matter what. A group of people stood behind Luo Qingtong. Chu Xiaofeng and the other children of the Chu family were somewhat stunned. The members of the Red Flame Mercenary Corps and the other mercenaries behind him took a step forward and patted the mercenaries on their shoulders. "Haha, I knew you would stand out. That's right. Young Master Xiaoqi has done us a great favor. How can we not stand out?" Those mercenaries who came from the Great Elders and Second Elders branches snorted coldly. "Do you think you're the only ones who know how to repay kindness?" The mercenaries cast sidelong glances at Gu Yifeng and the others. These guys didn't retreat either, right? Chapter 26:19. What a joke. They weren't any less hot-blooded than these people. They couldn't possibly allow others to point at them and call them cowards in the future. The atmosphere was joyous and harmonious. When Chu Yuqing saw this scene, he was so angry that smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. What made him even angrier was that most of the mercenaries behind the Tianfeng Chu clan disciples had also walked behind Luo Qingtong. These mercenaries had signed an agreement with the Tianfeng Chu clan until the fight for the Tianluo grass began. Now that the heart of the continent had been opened, They no longer needed to listen to the orders of the Tianfeng Chu clan disciples. Thus, when they saw that Chu Yuqing was making things difficult for Luo Qingtong and wasn't willing to give up, they immediately walked out. The law couldn't punish the majority, so the mercenaries all gathered together. They weren't afraid that the Tianfeng Chu clan people would settle accounts with them after the autumn. The Tianfeng Chu clan people wouldn't purge Tianfeng mercenary city, right? Even if the Tianfeng Chu clan people could do it, they wouldn't do it just because of Chu Yuqing's grudges and methods. Besides, they still had Chu Xiaofeng on their side. This wasn't just a grudge between them and the Tianfeng Chu clan. It was a grudge between the 8th elder and the 3rd elder. Because of this, the mercenaries didn't hesitate in the slightest as they walked out. Except for those who were not on good terms with Luo Qingtong, those from the Black Iron mercenary group, and those mercenary groups that were on good terms with them. The others all walked behind Luo Qingtong. In an instant, a large wave of people and power had gathered behind Luo Qingtong. This power wasn't inferior to the power behind Chu Yuqing and the others. It was just that Chu Yuqing and the others were top-notch disciples, so the ranks of their guards were much higher than the mercenaries. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong would have been able to overwhelm them with just the number of people and power she had gathered. Bastard! Chu Yuqing's expression was extremely gloomy. He'd originally wanted to force Luo Qingtong to turn her back on her friends and family. Without Chu Xiaofeng and the others to help her, it would be easy for him to deal with the other party. Who would have thought that such a small mercenary would have such high prestige in the Heavenly Wind mercenary city? He was just a young man who hadn't even reached the exalted realm. How could he make the mercenaries of Heavenly Wind mercenary city so obedient and obedient? Chu Yuqing's expression was one of anger. Chu Kuer Chu Yufei and the others had been paying attention to Luo Qingtong. She watched as the mercenaries came out one by one to support Luo Qingtong. Everyone's faces were indescribably twisted. How could this be? Luo Xiaoqi is such a bitch. How can she command so many mercenaries? Chu Kuer's voice was sharp. She almost couldn't control herself and screamed. But even so, her voice was still a deep growl. At the same time, she grabbed Chu Yufei's hand tightly. Chu Yufei's hand was so tight that the back of her hand was about to bleed. But Chu Yufei didn't seem to notice. She bit her lip and looked in Luo Qingtong's direction. Her face was filled with unwillingness. She'd thought that Luo Qingtong wouldn't be able to escape. She hadn't expected that she would be able to gain the support of these mercenaries. But so what if that was the case? If she'd only offended them, then Chu Yuqing would have stopped when he saw this scene. Chapter 26:20. Although the mercenaries around her were strong, how could they be a match for the guards behind Chu Yuqing and the other top disciples? Thinking of this, Chu Yufei sneered again. Feng Yu, Bei Qing, and the others were also stunned when they saw so many mercenaries walking over. The evil physician is indeed the evil physician. They murmured in their hearts. If anyone else had encountered such a situation, they would have died a long time ago. Yet the evil physician always had unexpected things happening. These mercenaries were actually so supportive of the evil physician. How could any random person do such a thing? After all, how long had Luo Qingtong stayed in Mercenary City? Wasn't her prestige a little too high? Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had always known that Luo Qingtong was powerful, but they didn't expect her to be so powerful. For ordinary people, if they were suddenly teleported from a 9-star star field, or even from a low-level continent to a high-rank star field, they would be lucky if they could keep themselves alive. How could they be like Luo Qingtong, who was able to survive in a 6-star region despite her lowly strength? Everyone had chased after Luo Qingtong all the way here. Whether it was in Heavenly Wind Inscription City, Heavenly Wind Mercenary City, or this abandoned continent, they were all impressed by Luo Qingtong's methods. In their entire lives, they would probably only meet one extraordinary woman like the evil physician. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were all amazed. Yi Qianxian tilted his head slightly and looked at the young man beside him. He held back his gaze and didn't say anything. Otherwise, he might not be able to stop himself from pulling Luo Qingtong into his arms and holding her tightly. This was the woman he had his eyes on. Even if he wasn't by her side, even if she was in a dangerous situation, she would still be able to deal with it calmly. This kind of Luo Qingtong made Yi Qianxian love and feel proud of her. He was also very worried about his gains and losses. This woman was like the wind. He always felt that if he didn't hold her tightly, she would disappear without a trace. Yet, she was so powerful that Yi Qianxian really couldn't do anything to her. Usually, it was others who admired him, worried about his gains and losses, and loved him so much that they died because of him. Only when it was his turn did he know how difficult it was to fall in love with someone. Yi Qianxian's gaze deepened. Luo Qingtong looked at the mercenaries standing behind her with a look of surprise. She didn't expect these people to stand by her side. Previously, when she helped them, she was indeed thinking of borrowing their strength when the fight for the Tianluo grass began. But at that time, she only thought that if they didn't do anything to her, she would have a chance to fish in troubled waters. She didn't expect that they would stand by her side when she faced face-to-face with danger. Sure enough, they were the most loyal and righteous people. Although these mercenaries were despised by those big powers and aristocratic families for having shallow foundations and being uncouth, in Luo Qingtong's eyes, they were much better than those big powers and aristocratic families who spoke of righteousness, but in the end, stabbed her in the back. At least these people knew what it meant to repay kindness. Luo Qingtong glanced at these people, then looked at Chu Yucheng. She hadn't said a word since the other party had opened his mouth. It wasn't that she had nothing to say, but that she was too lazy to say anything. With Yi Qianxian and the others here, Luo Qingtong knew that she wouldn't be in any danger. Thus, she couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Chu Yucheng and let him perform his one-man show. Chapter 26-21. Young Master Yucheng. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. The words "Young Master Yucheng" were spoken in an unusually cold and sarcastic tone. Just when everyone thought that she was admitting defeat, and that Chu Yucheng had already prepared himself to act all high and mighty, Luo Qingtong's cold voice rang out. "You talk too much nonsense. Didn't you say you'd make me beg for death? I'll wait for you." She smiled at Chu Yucheng. She'd been pretending to be a rabbit for too long. She almost thought she was a rabbit. But even if she was a rabbit, she was still a little white rabbit with steel teeth. If Chu Yucheng wanted to deal with her, he'd have to grit his teeth until they broke. Luo Qingtong sneered. With the people behind her, even if Yi Qianxian and the others didn't make a move, she could still toy with Chu Yucheng and the others. "If you don't believe me, why don't you try?" The moment Luo Qingtong said that, everyone around was dumbfounded. Luo Qingtong had respectfully addressed Chu Yucheng as Young Master Yucheng. Just to say such words? Wasn't she deliberately provoking Chu Yucheng? He wasn't going to let her go. Now that he was angered by her, he probably wouldn't care about anything else. This Luo Xiaoqi, had she gone crazy? This thought flashed through the minds of the Tianfeng Chu family members. Gu Yifeng and the others were also very stunned. They'd never heard Luo Qingtong speak in such a domineering manner. They didn't know why, but it was quite moving to listen to. "Haha. Well said, Xiaoqi." Hu Zhan slapped Luo Qingtong on the shoulder and laughed heartily. "I told you before, we men have to be strong. You used to be so soft, but now you're being bullied. That's good, you're finally acting like a man." Luo Qingtong's lips twitched at Hu Zhan's words. Who was acting like a man? She was clearly domineering. However, Hu Zhan's words helped her explain that her change was not sudden. Luo Qingtong didn't want to tolerate Chu Yucheng any longer. But if possible, she didn't want Yi Qianxian to discover her identity. After this trip to the abandoned continent, it would be best to reunite with Yi Qianxian. At that time, she would have to appease Yi Qianxian properly. Otherwise, this man would definitely explode. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she felt guilty again. However, she did not know that she had been discovered long ago. Yi Qianren looked at her deeply and didn't say anything. Let this woman continue to pretend. How could it be so easy to pay back all those debts? The two of them had different thoughts. As for Chu Yucheng, after hearing Luo Qingtong's words, his face immediately turned the color of a pig's liver. When Hu Zhan's voice rang out, his expression turned even darker. Good. Good. He looked at Luo Qingtong and the others and said the word good twice in a row. His swollen face and temples showed at a glance that he was suppressing his anger and killing intent. You're very good. Since you're in a hurry to die, I'll fulfill your wish. As he spoke, he sternly shouted, Chu Hanyu, help me capture her. Chu Hanyu was the name of one of the ninth elder's top disciples. Chu Yuqing's words meant that he wanted these top disciples to help him capture Luo Qingtong and kill Gu Yifeng and the others. Since these people wanted to help Luo Xiaoqi, they should be prepared to die. Did they really think that he wouldn't dare touch them just because they were on Chu Xiaofeng's side? Chapter 26-22. Chu Yuqing sneered and raised his hand, ordering the guards behind him to rush forward. The guards of Chu Hanyu and the others beside him also moved. However, just as they rushed out, a thunderous explosion resounded in everyone's ears. Let's see who dares to touch her. As he spoke, a figure swept over from the distance like a whirlwind. In an instant, it appeared in front of Luo Qingtong and the others. In an instant, a guard who was about to approach Luo Qingtong and the others was blasted away by the figure. Roar! Following the roar of the figure, everyone discovered that the figure was riding a giant white beast. The giant beast's forelimbs were on the ground. Its fur was elegant and smooth, and it had a long fluffy tail that swayed in the air. It had a pair of reddish gold eyes that looked exceptionally noble and domineering. Sitting on its back was a man wearing a pale blue robe. The robe on his body also looked very wild and domineering. His eyes were red with anger, and he looked at Chu Yuqing and the others with the same ferocity of a wild beast. You dare hurt me? Chu Lingfeng's expression was fierce. He was just about to say the word master, when he remembered Luo Qingtong's previous warning. She had told him not to reveal her identity in front of others, and he immediately swallowed the words back down. He said coldly, You dare hurt my people? You're courting death. Luo Qingtong heard his words and felt her stomach twist. Where did this guy learn to make such a domineering declaration? If it had been Chu Xiaofeng who said it, it wouldn't have been a problem, but if it had been him, she wasn't even considered one of his people, right? Forget it, she couldn't ask too much of him. It was fine as long as he didn't call her master. She could be considered to have muddled her way through. After all, he was standing in front of her and the others. This included Chu Xiaofeng. She should be considered one of his people, right? In that case, he could also be considered a blockhead. With that in mind, Luo Qingtong quickly glanced at Yi Qianxian. The latter's face was hidden behind the white jade mask, making him look unfathomable. On the other side, when Chu Yuqing and the others saw Chu Lingfeng appear, their faces were filled with indescribable shock. You idiot, why are you here? Chu Yuqing was so shocked that he forgot to hide it. He directly called out the word idiot. As for Chu Kuer and the others, they looked to Chu Lingfeng with astonishment in their eyes. It was as if they had seen a ghost. Wasn't Chu Lingfeng killed by Chu Yuqing? Not only that, but he was also heavily injured. If Luo Qingtong hadn't suddenly appeared to save him, he would have died at Chu Yuqing's hands. Why was it that his current situation was completely different from what Chu Yuqing and the others had described? How did Chu Lingfeng look like he was heavily injured? When he'd sent that guard flying, how did he look like he'd used up all his blood? Not only that, but when everyone saw the aura of power rippling from Chu Lingfeng's body, their eyes widened. You. They looked at Chu Lingfeng in shock. They discovered that he'd actually advanced to the human martial realm. He was the first person in this generation of the Tianfeng Chu family to advance to the human martial realm. Chapter 26-23. Everyone was shocked, but Chu Lingfeng didn't feel anything. He'd long since reached the peak of the 9th level of the Amethyst Elder, and was only one step away from breaking through to the human martial realm. Of course, many people would take a long time to take this step. But Chu Lingfeng had been ambushed this time, and his bloodline power had been completely exhausted. He'd then recovered, reaching the level of destruction before establishment. In addition, Luo Qingtong had broken the contract with Snowball, allowing him to form a contract with Snowball. Under the stimulation of these two factors, Chu Lingfeng had broken through the 9th level of the Amethyst Elder and reached the human martial realm. It was precisely because he needed to break through that Chu Lingfeng hadn't appeared in the heart of the continent in time. Otherwise, how would that trash Chu Yuqing have had the chance to bully his master? As Chu Lingfeng thought this, the scene of Chu Yuqing and the others trying to make a move on Luo Qingtong flashed through his mind. Immediately, a wave of ruthlessness surged in his heart, and he grinned maliciously at them. What? Are you unhappy that I didn't die? Don't worry, you'll be even more unhappy later. And cry even more miserably. Chu Lingfeng's expression was cold and ruthless. At this moment, he didn't look the least bit foolish. In fact, Chu Lingfeng would immediately become like a ferocious beast when it came to matters of battle. His entire person would become incomparably cold and ruthless. At that time, he looked just like a ferocious beast in human form. He was born for battle. If not for his straightforward and honest nature, Chu Yuqing and the others wouldn't have dared to oppose Chu Lingfeng in this state, let alone try to ambush and kill him. Chu Lingfeng, who'd entered battle mode, didn't show the slightest bit of foolishness. Even Chu Yuqing and the others, after scheming against Chu Lingfeng, were only able to kill him by surrounding and killing him. They couldn't use any other method, because Chu Lingfeng's strength wasn't something that ordinary people could compare to. And in battle mode, he wasn't so easy to deceive. His battle instincts were better than anyone else's. When he saw Chu Lingfeng like this, Chu Yuqing's face instantly turned deathly pale. He couldn't help but take a step back. It was the same for the people behind him, especially the Tianfeng Chu clan's disciples who followed behind him, and the other top disciples. They were on the verge of tears under Chu Lingfeng's gaze. Everyone knew that although this new young master was simple and honest, his reverse scale was not to be touched. In the past, when he had just arrived at Tianfeng Chu's home, there were people who bullied him because of his straightforward nature. They openly slandered Yin Yang in front of him, and called his mother a slut. She thought that with Chu Lingfeng's simple and honest personality, he wouldn't do anything even if he heard it. Who would have thought that Chu Lingfeng would go berserk and tear apart the Tianfeng Chu clan's disciple with bloodshot eyes? Since then, everyone knew how terrifying Chu Lingfeng was. They knew that they couldn't touch his reverse scale in front of him. Chu Lingfeng was a tyrannical person. He protected his food and all resources. Once he set his mind on something or someone, no matter what others said, he wouldn't change his mind. If someone dared to make a move against him, he didn't know what it meant to hold back. He'd directly beat the other party half to death. Unless they used resources to trade with him, it was possible that he'd beat them to death. Even the family head and the elders couldn't do anything to him. Many of the top disciples present had already suffered at his hands, not to mention Chu Yuqing and the others. They were the first to find trouble with Chu Lingfeng. In the end, they were also the ones who'd been beaten to a pulp. Chapter 26-24. Needless to say, the guards behind them were even more shocked. They looked at Chu Lingfeng's figure with shock and fear. Their faces were filled with indescribable terror. The young master of the Tianfeng Chu family hadn't died. He didn't even seem to have suffered any serious injuries, nor did he seem to have exhausted his bloodline power. Not only that, but his strength had also increased. He had become the first person of the Tianfeng Chu family's generation to reach the human martial arts realm. He was truly the first person. They had participated in Chu Yuqing's plan. They had been ordered by him to kill Chu Lingfeng. What would happen to them now? Everyone's teeth chattered as they wondered this. Chu Lingfeng didn't even bother to pay attention to them. After he finished speaking, he immediately turned around and looked at Luo Qingtong. Mas, Luo Qingtong, are you all right? Chu Lingfeng's voice was very loud. The word mas was twisted so stiffly that it almost jumped out of his mouth. Fortunately, he remembered Luo Qingtong's instructions in time, and swallowed it back down. He changed it to Luo Qingtong's alias. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. Although she knew that she couldn't expect too much from him, she still couldn't help but cover her face. Oh my god, this idiot. You should have asked Chu Xiaofeng first. However, Luo Qingtong also knew that it was asking too much for Chu Lingfeng to put others before his concern for her. Didn't he see that Chu Lingfeng had been staring at her from the moment he appeared? He didn't even look at Chu Xiaofeng and the others. If she made him act too much, it would be too out of character. That wouldn't be good. It was better to be like this now. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong could only smooth things over. I'm fine. Thank you for your concern, young master. As she said this, she immediately explained to Chu Lingfeng and the others. I saved young Master Chu's life before and healed his injuries. Luo Qingtong's words made Gu Yifeng and the others, who were stunned by Chu Lingfeng's unusual actions, feel relieved. So that's how it is. I was wondering how little Seven knew the young master. Chu Xiaofeng was also very surprised, but at this moment, he had already relaxed. Chu Lingfeng's previous words were very clear. It was very clear that Chu Yuqing and the others had already made a move against Chu Lingfeng. This should be the reason why Luo Shaoqi saved Chu Lingfeng's life and healed his injuries. However, when he thought that Luo Qingtong had saved Chu Lingfeng's life, he was referring to the fact that Luo Qingtong had encountered the seriously injured Chu Lingfeng, saved him, and healed his injuries. What he didn't know was that Luo Qingtong had single-handedly charged into the encirclement of Chu Yuqing and the others, and forcibly rescued Chu Lingfeng from a hopeless situation. Even if they were beaten to death, they would never have imagined that Luo Qingtong would be able to do such a thing, and even succeed. Everyone's expressions suddenly became clear. Even Chu Qiankong and the others thought so. Only Chu Yuqing and the others knew what was going on. They looked at Luo Qingtong and gritted their teeth. If it weren't for this youth, they wouldn't have fallen into such a situation. On the other hand, Yi Qianren faintly raised her eyebrows. Was this woman deliberately saying this for him to hear? In order to continue hiding her identity, she's really going all out. She's drawing a clear line between herself and Chu Lingfeng. Yi Qianxian's lips curled slightly, but he didn't say anything. His deep and solemn eyes didn't reveal the slightest bit of emotion or fluctuation. Luo Qingtong looked at him and immediately breathed a sigh of relief. This should be a cover-up, right? Chapter 26-25. Leave her to me. He stretched out his hand towards Yi Qianxian. His eyes, which were red because of his wildness, stared straight at Yi Qianxian. I will protect her. When Chu Lingfeng said this, Luo Qingtong almost bit her own tongue. She had never thought that Chu Lingfeng would do something like this. The corners of her lips twitched as she watched Chu Lingfeng stare at Yi Qianxian. She suddenly felt a headache coming on. In this situation, from other people's point of view, staying by Chu Lingfeng's side was indeed the best choice. But only Luo Qingtong knew that staying by Yi Qianxian's side was the best choice. But this was not the main point. The main point was that Chu Lingfeng's words were too ambiguous and ambiguous. Those who knew, such as Luo Qingtong, knew that he really wanted to protect her. But in other people's ears, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched violently. There's no need, young Master Chu. Before Luo Qingtong could finish her sentence, Chu Lingfeng's voice suddenly rose. Of course. You just stay by my side. When Chu Lingfeng said this, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched even more. This guy even knew how to interrupt. Who taught him that? But why was he so insistent on getting her to his side? Was he worried about her safety? As Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, she heard Yi Qianxian's cold voice. There's no need. I took her protection fee, so I will naturally protect her. There's no need for young Master Chu to worry. As Yi Qianxian spoke, he tightened his grip on Luo Qingtong's waist. As it turned out, when Chu Yuqing and the others were about to attack them, he had already taken Luo Qingtong into his arms. If Chu Lingfeng had come just a little later, Chu Yuqing and the others would have already died without a burial site. However, it was also good that Chu Lingfeng was here. It saved them the trouble of making a move. However, Yi Qianxian didn't expect that Luo Qingtong's right-hand man would snatch her away from him as soon as he arrived. Why did she have to stay by his side as long as he protected her? Yi Qianxian sneered. His woman should naturally stay by his side. Therefore, Yi Qianxian showed no signs of letting him go. Not only that, he also used Luo Qingtong's protection fee as an excuse to block Chu Lingfeng. After all, He had taken someone's money and had to take care of their problems. There was naturally a reason why he was so protective of Luo Xiaoqi. Otherwise, how could he explain his actions? Yi Qianxian wasn't ready to let Luo Qingtong know that he had seen through her identity. The two of them faced off just like that. Yi Qianxian's voice was cold. The moment he opened his mouth, Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others spontaneously stood behind him. Behind Chu Lingfeng, a group of people from the Tianfeng Chu clan had also gathered. These people had all just arrived. They were from the Tianfeng Chu clan. Among them was the 8th elder's top disciple Chu Jingyi. Seeing the confrontation in front of him, Chu Jingyi was at a complete loss. He looked at Chu Xiaofeng beside him and asked, "What's going on? Why are they confronting each other?" Chu Jingyi had just arrived, but he had already learned what had happened from the people around him. Naturally, he knew that Yi Qianxian was on Chu Lingfeng's side. But why were they confronting each other now? And Luo Xiaoqi was also involved in it? Chu Jingyi looked at Luo Qingtong being held by Chu Lingfeng while Yi Qianxian was holding her waist. Suddenly an idea popped into his mind. Chapter 26:26. Chu Jingyi's lips inexplicably twitched as he thought of this. This must be my misconception, right? However, just as he was thinking this, he heard Chu Yuqing's mocking voice ring out at this moment. "So that's how it is. Chu Lingfeng, so that's how you feel about this Luo Xiaoqi." No wonder he called Luo Xiaoqi master before. So he and Luo Xiaoqi had this kind of relationship. Chu Lingfeng, that idiot, was actually gay. Not only that, the one who broke was a fickle man. Chu Yuqing looked with disdain at Chu Lingfeng and Yi Qianxian, who were holding on to Luo Qingtong. He no longer had any doubts as to why Luo Qingtong had suddenly run over to save Chu Lingfeng. He even automatically replaced the master that Luo Qingtong had called out when she came to save Chu Lingfeng. It must be known that these two words, to a certain extent, had the same meaning. But in another situation, the meaning of the word master could be interpreted in a much more complex way. Chu Yuqing had already regarded Luo Qingtong as Chu Lingfeng's boy toy. But now, it seemed that Chu Lingfeng, that idiot, had not only taken a fancy to a man, but had even thrown away his status as the young master of the Tianfeng Chu family for that man. He had actually called the other party master. What a disgrace to the Tianfeng Chu family. It had to be said that if this had been done by any other member of the Tianfeng Chu family, Chu Yuqing wouldn't have made such a connection. But who told this person to be Chu Lingfeng? When he thought of the other party's idiotic and gullible personality, Chu Yuqing didn't doubt his own thoughts at all. It turned out that Luo Xiaoqi and Chu Lingfeng had such a relationship. No wonder Luo Xiaoqi suddenly came to save Chu Lingfeng, and the latter's attitude towards her was also so tight. Chu Yuqing had previously suspected the identities of Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong. However, the way Chu Lingfeng addressed him as master was too inconceivable. Even though Chu Yuqing suspected that Chu Lingfeng had truly recognized Luo Qingtong as his master, when he thought of Luo Qingtong's strength, which hadn't even reached the venerable realm, and that she was a youth, he began to wonder if his suspicions were correct. When he saw Chu Lingfeng and Yi Qianxian fighting over Luo Qingtong, he suddenly realized that he had guessed the relationship between Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng. When Luo Qingtong heard his realization, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Such a powerful imagination actually left her speechless. If she didn't have Sherlock Holmes's life, could she not have contracted his illness? The truth was simply worlds apart from his conjecture. Luo Qingtong was speechless, but she also rejoiced at Chu Yuqing's imagination. At the very least, being misunderstood by others as having a homosexual relationship with Chu Lingfeng was better than being recognized by Yi Qianxian, right? She didn't know why Chu Lingfeng, that blockhead, was so insistent on her going over to his side. But Chu Yuqing's explanation was better than having Luo Qingtong's identity exposed by Yi Qianxian. Chu Lingfeng's eyes were cold, and he completely ignored Chu Yuqing. His pair of beastly red eyes stared fixedly at Yi Qianxian and said, "Let go. My master isn't someone you can touch." Just as he was about to speak, he remembered Luo Qingtong's previous instructions. He immediately swallowed the rest of his words and changed them to Chapter 26-27. Oh my God. Luo Qingtong covered her face with her hands. She really couldn't bear to watch. Fortunately, Chu Yuqing had already found an excellent excuse for her. Otherwise, with Chu Lingfeng's provocative actions, her identity would definitely be exposed. Was this guy here specifically to subdue her? She had told him not to call her master in front of outsiders. He hadn't called her that. But this intimate gesture, this ambiguous way of speaking, what was the difference between that and calling her master? It was simply a pain in the ass. Luo Qingtong felt that she had really been miserably tricked by Chu Lingfeng, this big blockhead. She didn't know whether to call this guy obedient or loyal, whether it was letting her go over to his side, or letting Yi Qianxian let go. Chu Lingfeng was doing it for her own good. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. She couldn't blame Chu Lingfeng. When Yi Qianxian heard Chu Lingfeng's words, he immediately laughed. Behind his white jade mask, a brilliant light shone in all directions. That extremely handsome face was now full of smiles, but it was because of anger. Your people. Yi Qianxian sneered at Chu Lingfeng. If he didn't know that this big blockhead was Luo Qingtong's person, and that his loyalty to her was unquestionable, without the slightest bit of impurity, he would have already killed him. Just based on Chu Lingfeng's words alone, he would have made him bleed on the spot. When had his woman become someone else's person? Did this woman make him say this? Yi Qianxian's eyes looked dangerously at Luo Qingtong. The corners of the latter's lips twitched. Seeing that Chu Lingfeng and Yi Qianxian were getting more and more hostile, and that a fight might break out in the next moment, she hurriedly said to Yi Qianxian, "Cough, brother, I'm sorry. I'll go over first to inform young Master Chu." After saying this, she explained to Yi Qianxian in a low voice, "You should be able to see that young Master Chu's temperament is different from that of ordinary people. He wants me to go over now, probably to repay me for saving his life. He wants to protect me well. Brother, you shouldn't argue with him, so as to avoid delaying the fight for the heavenly grass." Luo Qingtong's words were very reasonable. She even explained Chu Lingfeng's excessive closeness and protectiveness to her perfectly. This cunning woman. Yi Qianxian snorted coldly. Although he didn't want to let go of Luo Qingtong, he didn't want to expose Luo Qingtong. However, he wasn't prepared to expose Luo Qingtong's identity yet, so he had no reason to keep her here. After all, although he considered himself as Luo Qingtong's protector, Luo Qingtong had requested to go over to Chu Lingfeng's side. He couldn't stop her. Thinking of this, he immediately let go of Luo Qingtong's waist. Chu Lingfeng's eyes were bloodshot. He couldn't control the bestial nature in his body, and wanted to make a move. Or was it because Luo Qingtong was by Yi Qianxian's side? He was afraid of hurting Luo Qingtong, so he deliberately suppressed the violence in his body. Otherwise, according to his reckless temper, he would definitely beat her up first. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's snatch Master first. The man in front of her was too rude. He actually dared to make a move on her master. He even hugged Master's waist. How could this be? Even if Master was a man, it still wasn't allowed. Chu Lingfeng pulled Luo Qingtong to his side. He looked at Yi Qianxian with a face full of vigilance and hostility. It was as if he had done something unpardonable. Luo Qingtong found it funny. She lowered her voice and asked, "What's the matter? Do you have a grudge against him? Otherwise, why would he insist on taking her over?" Chapter 26-28. Luo Qingtong knew that Chu Lingfeng didn't know about Yi Qianxian's current identity. In order to prevent him from exposing himself, Luo Qingtong didn't tell him. "Mas Shaoqi, don't go near him." Chu Lingfeng looked at Luo Qingtong gloomily and said, "The person who likes you won't be happy. Don't abandon me after having sex with me." Chu Lingfeng, the blockhead, wanted to say, "Mingzun won't be happy. Master, don't abandon me after having sex with me." But there were so many people around, and Luo Qingtong didn't allow him to reveal her identity. After thinking for a while, he forced himself to say this. However, he didn't expect that his words, coupled with his declaration to Yi Qianxian, would be so ambiguous. At this moment, even if Chu Lingfeng told everyone that he didn't have any feelings for Luo Qingtong, no one would believe him. The expressions of the Tianfeng Chu clan members were very interesting. As for Gu Yifeng and the other mercenaries, they were all dumbfounded. Damn. The young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan really did have such feelings for Luo Shaoqi. Everyone had originally thought that Chu Yuqing was spouting nonsense, but Chu Lingfeng's words proved that he was telling the truth. Chu Lingfeng's feelings for Luo Shaoqi were really impure. As for Chu Jingyi and Chu Xiaofeng, they were even more shocked. Wait a minute, the young master is a homosexual. The corners of Chu Jingyi's lips twitched. He didn't know what to say. Chu Lingfeng was the only direct descendant of the Tianfeng Chu clan. If he was a homosexual, the elders of the clan would probably explode. Even the head of the clan wouldn't ignore it. Chu Xiaofeng stared at Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng in bewilderment. Oh my god, this is too explosive. How could Luo Shaoqi and young master have such a relationship? While everyone was shocked and dumbfounded, Luo Qingtong was so shocked by Chu Lingfeng's words that she slipped and almost fell to the ground. Is that why you purposely brought me to your side? She was wondering why Chu Lingfeng, this big blockhead, looked like he was going all out with Yi Qianxian. It was impossible for the two of them to know each other. Chu Lingfeng didn't know Yi Qianxian's identity either. After Luo Qingtong figured out the meaning of Chu Lingfeng's words, she suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Her lips twitched, and she didn't know what to say to Chu Lingfeng. Did this blockhead know that the white jade-masked man he was talking about was Yi Qianxian? He even told her not to get too close to him. Luo Qingtong's heart was angry and funny for a while. When Chu Lingfeng heard her words, he thought she was blaming him. He suddenly felt more depressed in his heart. He knew that he should listen to his master. Whoever his master wanted to be with had nothing to do with him. But since he was with Luo Qingtong, he knew that Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were a couple. Mingzun was so good to his master. He was powerful, strong, and handsome. In Chu Lingfeng's mind, only Mingzun was so good to Luo Qingtong. Mingzun was always the first to arrive when Luo Qingtong was in danger. Mingzun was the only one who cared about Luo Qingtong in every way possible. He was more concerned about her than the people who followed her through life and death. He was the one they recognized as the one who was qualified to stand beside Luo Qingtong. Chu Lingfeng regarded Luo Qingtong as a belief and a god. In his mind, no one was more powerful than Luo Qingtong. Chapter 26-29. But Mingzun was different. He was sincerely good to master, and put master in his heart. Chu Lingfeng and the others only admitted that he was by Luo Qingtong's side. Seeing that Luo Qingtong blamed him for this, his heart suddenly felt very sad. Chu Lingfeng was not good with words and didn't know what to say. He was afraid that if he said too much, he would annoy master. But he also didn't want Luo Qingtong to abandon Yi Qianxian and choose someone else. No one was more suitable for master than Mingzun. He had to protect master for Mingzun, so that master wouldn't be deceived by someone with ulterior motives. Thinking of this, he immediately glared at Yi Qianxian and then shouted at Luo Qingtong, "I don't care. Anyway, I won't let you be with someone else." Hearing his words, Luo Qingtong almost spat out her saliva. Damn. Chu Lingfeng, you big fool. Do you know what you are saying now? What do you mean you won't let me be with someone else? What's with this overbearing CEO's declaration? Luo Qingtong's eyes twitched fiercely, and she didn't dare to look at Yi Qianxian's direction. Chu Lingfeng, this guy, was F*** king naturally evil. From the moment he appeared, every word and sentence was like digging a hole for her to die. This guy wasn't actually her subordinate, but her enemy. Luo Qingtong was about to shed tears of sadness for herself. While her heart was tangled, on the other side, Yi Qianxian looked at her and Chu Lingfeng with an unfathomable gaze. Naturally, he had heard the conversation between the two of them. Chu Lingfeng said that the person who likes you will not be happy, and asked Luo Qingtong not to abandon him. Yi Qianxian guessed that that person should be referring to himself. After all, He knew Luo Qingtong's identity. Other than him, no one else could be worthy of Luo Qingtong's words of abandoning him. He didn't expect Chu Lingfeng, this big fool, to be so protective of him. Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent. He didn't take the matter of Chu Lingfeng snatching Luo Qingtong away from his side so seriously. On the contrary, Luo Qingtong's expression at this moment made him feel very satisfied. This woman is used to acting. All day long, she's tricking left and right. She probably didn't expect to be tricked so miserably by her own people, right? Yi Qianxian coldly snorted in his heart. He made up his mind to pretend that he didn't know anything. He was determined not to expose Luo Qingtong's identity. Let her be tangled up like this. Let's see how she explains it to me in the future. Yi Qianxian's heart was satisfied, but his expression was indescribably leisurely and contented. Luo Qingtong didn't know that she had been seen through long ago. She was thinking about how to smooth things over with Chu Lingfeng's words. Their thoughts were different. On the other side, Chu Yuqing's heart was filled with indescribable pride. Sure enough, it was as he thought. This Chu Lingfeng had taken a fancy to Luo Shaoqi. A fool learning how to talk about love like other people. In the end, he would only be fooled by others. But although Chu Lingfeng was a fool, the people of the Tianfeng Chu family weren't fools, right? As Chu Yuqing thought this, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He had just been thinking about how to extricate himself from this matter. After all, if Chu Lingfeng didn't die, then the unlucky one would be him. All the plans he'd made before were now useless. Chapter 2630. Otherwise, even if they managed to kill Chu Lingfeng, they would still die. But this was different. Didn't they have Luo Shaoqi as their weakness? Luo Shaoqi had seduced the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan, seducing him into depravity and disregarding the dignity of the Tianfeng Chu clan. As the Tianfeng Chu clan's disciples, they couldn't just sit by and watch, could they? They had to eliminate this femme fatale Luo Shaoqi. Of course, if Chu Lingfeng tried to stop them and was accidentally killed by them, it would be an accident, wouldn't it? Chu Lingfeng was extremely pleased with himself as he thought of this. He really was a genius for coming up with such an idea. In this way, not only could he perfectly get rid of Chu Lingfeng, this huge hidden danger, but he could also make Luo Shaoqi, the person who had ruined his plans, die without a burial. If it weren't for her, he would have already killed Chu Lingfeng. Now it was just an eye for an eye. Chu Yuqing suddenly jumped out and shouted, "No, our Tianfeng Chu clan's young master can't fall in love with a man. Chu Lingfeng, this isn't just about you. It's about the entire Tianfeng Chu clan. We have the responsibility to prevent you from being seduced by other people with ulterior motives. Luo Shaoqi, you attacked our Tianfeng Chu clan's people before, and now you're seducing our Tianfeng Chu clan's young master to fall head over heels for you. I suspect that you were sent by other clans to deal with our Tianfeng Chu clan. Everyone, we can't let our young master do as he pleases. This Luo Shaoqi must be eliminated." As soon as Chu Yuqing's words came out, the surrounding Tianfeng Chu clan's disciples instantly understood. Chu Yuqing wanted to use the excuse of eliminating Luo Shaoqi to deal with Chu Lingfeng. This was especially true for Chu Hanyu and the others. When Chu Lingfeng had appeared, they had begun to distance themselves from Chu Yuqing and the others. After all, Chu Lingfeng hadn't died, and had even appeared in front of everyone. This meant that Chu Yuqing had already lost the initiative. His opponent was doomed, and they couldn't get involved with him. But when they heard Chu Yuqing's words, their faces froze. Then their eyes began to shine brightly. That's right, he wanted to kill Luo Shaoqi to deal with Chu Lingfeng. At that time, if Chu Lingfeng tried to stop them, they would say that it was an accident that they accidentally killed Chu Lingfeng to protect the dignity of the Tianfeng Chu family. It was Chu Lingfeng who was willing to die for Luo Shaoqi. He was a romantic. What did that have to do with people like them? In this way, they would be able to kill Chu Lingfeng openly. Everyone's breathing quickened. What kind of person would collude with Chu Yuqing? Naturally, it would be someone who was ambitious and covetously eyeing Chu Lingfeng's position as young master. Someone who wanted to kill him. Normally, These people wouldn't have dared to make a move against Chu Lingfeng. But now that they had a good reason to do so, they couldn't help but be moved. This was too rare. This opportunity was too hard to come by. Furthermore, it would allow them to go all out in the open without any reservations. Their hearts immediately started thumping violently. Unknowingly, they had gathered around Chu Yuqing from all directions. Chapter 26:31. Kill Chu Lingfeng? This way, no matter who became the head of the family, the elder council under their control would not be weakened. After all, in this generation, Chu Tianyi held absolute power. In the Tianfeng Chu family, his words were absolute, and the elder council's power was weakened to the extreme. They didn't want to see themselves being oppressed by Chu Lingfeng like their parents when they were in charge of the elder hall. The other party had inherited Chu Tianyi's bloodline, and was extremely terrifying. If they could strangle him here, everyone's hearts were stirred. They would not take the initiative to attack Chu Lingfeng, but if there was a chance to kill Chu Lingfeng, they would definitely not refuse. The eyes of the Tianfeng Chu family members flashed, but the faces of Chu Lingfeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others suddenly became solemn. Not good. Chu Yuqing has designs on the young master. Chu Jingyi's eyes were cold as he swept his gaze over the faces of the Tianfeng Chu family members. His heart immediately sank. He hadn't expected Chu Yuqing to find such an excuse to make trouble. This was troublesome. However, Chu Jingyi also knew that after Chu Yuqing failed to kill Chu Lingfeng, he would not rest until the latter was dead. Even if Chu Yuqing did not use Luo Shaoqi as an excuse, he would find other ways to make trouble. This had nothing to do with Luo Shaoqi. She just happened to give Chu Yuqing a reason. The real fuse was that Chu Yuqing wanted to kill Chu Lingfeng. He would not let Chu Lingfeng leave the abandoned continent alive. Otherwise, the one who would die in the end would be him. Chu Jingyi thought so, but he did not blame Luo Qingtong. Instead, he coldly said to Chu Xiaofeng and the others, "Protect the young master well." Chu Yuqing, aren't you meddling too much? What does it have to do with you who the young master likes? Even if the family doesn't allow it, the elders will naturally make a decision after we leave the abandoned continent. It's not your place to meddle. Emph. Chu Yuqing sneered at them. The eighth elder's people were the patriarch's sworn supporters. There was no need for him to be courteous to them. In any case, they would definitely stand on Chu Lingfeng's side. At that time, he would kill them all. As Chu Yuqing thought this, his expression darkened and he smiled proudly. Chu Jingyi, what are you saying? Us top disciples have been nurtured by our families. Naturally, we have to share the burden of our families. He's just a small mercenary. Just kill him. Why do we have to alarm the elders and have them make a move? There's no need to bother them. As Chu Yuqing spoke, he chuckled darkly. Instead, it's you who are so protective of her. Could it be that you were the ones who instigated this? Did you introduce such a troublemaker to the young lord? When he said this, his face suddenly turned solemn and he shouted sternly, "I think you all have bad intentions. After we kill Luo Shaoqi, we'll hold you accountable. If you dare to stop us, we'll treat you as her accomplice and deal with you together." Chu Yuqing's words had already revealed his ferocious side. His ambition and killing intent were as clear as day. Attack, surround them. Young lord, please forgive us. Chapter 26:32. Chu Yuqing said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was already prepared to make his move. Behind him, Chu Hanyu and the others all stepped forward. These people had all agreed to help Chu Yuqing find Chu Lingfeng and kill him. Now that they'd gotten such a good opportunity, and had a legitimate reason to attack, how could they endure? Immediately, he joined Chu Yuqing and the others in surrounding Chu Lingfeng, Chu Xiaofeng, Chu Jingyi and the others. Luo Qingtong had a lot of mercenaries on her side, but compared to the elite disciples' guards, they weren't enough. Although Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong hadn't made a move, their people had spread out far and wide, surrounding them in all directions. It was obvious that they didn't want to give Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong any chance to escape. Even if Luo Qingtong and the others managed to break through Chu Yuqing's encirclement, They still had them. At the critical moment, as long as they obstructed Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng's escape route, Chu Yuqing and the others would immediately catch up to them and completely surround them. This scene looked like a hopeless situation. The situation had changed so quickly that before the mercenaries behind Luo Qingtong could react, they were already completely surrounded. They hadn't expected the situation to change so quickly. By the time they reacted, they could only tighten their grip on their weapons and stick close to Luo Qingtong and the others. Little seventh young master. Everyone's hearts were filled with nervousness and worry. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't have time to think about how to explain things to Yi Qianxian. Instead, she looked at Chu Yuqing's people, who were taking the opportunity to make things difficult for her. The latter wasn't stupid. They knew that they were taking advantage of this opportunity to make things difficult for Chu Lingfeng. Luo Qingtong knew that although the relationship between her and Chu Lingfeng wasn't the kind of relationship that Chu Yuqing and the others thought it was. However, she was indeed Chu Lingfeng's weakness. Chu Yuqing and the others had stumbled upon a way to deal with Chu Lingfeng. But so what? They dared to use her as a raft to deal with Chu Lingfeng. Were they not afraid of spraining their feet? Luo Qingtong's face was cold. She looked at Chu Yuqing and the others, her eyes completely devoid of emotion. She hated it when others used her. This point was only second to being betrayed. Chu Yuqing wanted to use her as a stepping stone, so he shouldn't blame her for breaking his foot. As for Beiqing, Feng Yu and the others, they were prepared to intervene the moment Chu Yuqing and the others attacked. However, they were stopped by Yi Qianxian. No need. His voice was indifferent, deep and cold. He looked in Luo Qingtong's direction. Just by looking at this woman's current attitude, he knew that she had a way. There was no need for him to intervene. Yi Qianxian was happy to let Luo Qingtong resolve this herself. He liked to see this woman's radiant appearance very much. Although he was always gloomy about this person's craftiness and fickleness, and how she didn't like to rely on him, Yi Qianxian knew that it was precisely this type of Luo Qingtong that deeply attracted him. Whether she was crafty and fickle-minded, eccentric, arrogant, domineering, or insufferably arrogant, he liked it all. Moreover, he was happy to discover more different sides of her. Yi Qianxian's words stunned Beiqing, Feng Yu and the others. Master. They looked at Yi Qianxian. They didn't know if the latter was angry at Luo Qingtong and wanted to make her suffer before making a move. But there was nothing between the demonic physician and Chu Lingfeng. They could all tell that their master couldn't have been so blinded by the situation that he didn't notice anything, right? As Feng Yu thought this, she immediately opened her mouth to mediate. Chapter 2633. Calamity. Luo Qingtong chuckled as she looked in Chu Yuqing's direction. Young Master Yuqing has already pinned such a big label on me. If I don't do something, it really seems like I'll be living up to this reputation of being a calamity. What a loss. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. Her smile, which was covered by her birthmark, revealed 3 parts malevolence and 7 parts devilish charm. Speaking of which, it was strange. Luo Qingtong's appearance was so ugly that no one would be able to look directly at her. But in front of everyone, her ugly face covered with birthmarks was always overlooked. Not only that, but when she smiled, her 3 parts malevolent and 7 parts ugly appearance gave people an indescribable feeling of breathtaking grace. But Luo Qingtong's appearance was clearly extremely ugly. No one knew where this breathtaking feeling came from. But it just so happened that they had such a feeling. When Luo Qingtong's words came out, Chu Yuqing immediately sneered. In his opinion, Luo Qingtong was struggling on her deathbed. Just based on the fact that he had something on Chu Lingfeng, he could easily kill Luo Qingtong. Not only that, but even Chu Lingfeng wouldn't be able to escape this fate. Luo Qingtong had previously rescued Chu Lingfeng from his encirclement. But this time, almost all the members of the Chu clan were on his side. How could her people be compared to the guards of the Chu clan of Heavenly Wind? Chu Lingfeng's side only had Chu Jingyi, Chu Xiaofeng, and 8th Elder's people. Apart from them, there were no other reinforcements. What else could Luo Qingtong do? Solidify her reputation as a calamity? If she died, then her reputation as a calamity would be solidified. Not only that, but she would also implicate Chu Lingfeng and drag him down with her. As Chu Yuqing thought this, he suddenly felt an indescribable sense of victory. He looked at Luo Qingtong and sneered. It seems that you know your crime very well. Then we won't be polite. If you want to stall for more time and talk nonsense, then let me tell you, don't waste your time. Because we are loyal to our families and the protection of our families. In order to persuade the young lord not to do anything stupid, we will spare no effort. That's right. Chu Yuqing's words were a warning to Luo Qingtong not to try any more tricks. Among the Tianfeng Chu clan members present, other than the 8th elder who was absolutely loyal to the clan head, the rest of them couldn't wait for Chu Lingfeng to die. Previously, he didn't have a reason. But now, he had provided these people with an open and honorable reason to not be afraid of being punished. Under these circumstances, it didn't matter how much scheming and eloquence Luo Qingtong had. Even if she could turn a dead person into a living one, it wouldn't be of any use. Compared to the benefits of killing Chu Lingfeng, even something as important as obtaining the Tianluo grass couldn't compare. Otherwise, how could these people ignore the fact that the heart of the continent was about to open after hearing his words? Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were dead meat. No one on this abandoned continent could save them. However, as soon as Chu Yuqing spoke, Luo Qingtong's words were mixed with a bit of ridicule, coldness, and contempt. Is that so? Then young Master Yuqing, you'd better watch carefully. Watch how this calamity overturns the heavens and earth and overturns the rain with a flip of my hand. Chapter 2634. The latter and the others were watching the internal strife of the Tianfeng Chu family. They even stood far away so that it would be easier for the people of the Tianfeng Chu family to take action. Are you sure you want to just stand by and watch? Luo Qingtong put on a faint smile. Together with the huge birthmark on her face, her devilish temperament was revealed again. Her eyes were fixed on the man in the front who was surrounded by the top disciples of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan. Compared with the chaos of the Tianfeng Chu family, the people of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan were much more orderly. All the disciples of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan who had hurried over were following the man on their own accord. Those who were dressed like top disciples were clustered around him, while the others were scattered in the surroundings. They were arranged in order according to their cultivation and status. There was no noise or chaos at all. It was not hard to imagine how prestigious the man was in the Lien family of the Flying Star clan. At this moment, hearing Luo Qingtong's words, all the people of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan raised their heads and looked at Luo Qingtong. The man was no exception. Are you talking to me? His thin lips parted slightly. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes when he looked at Luo Qingtong. He probably didn't expect that Luo Qingtong would speak to the people of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan at this moment. Yes. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent, and she looked indescribably calm. She looked at the man with a smile and said, "Of course, if there is another person here who can be the master of the Lien family of the Flying Star clan, you can take it that I'm not talking to you." Hearing that, Lien Xingchen narrowed his eyes immediately. He looked at Luo Qingtong and observed her carefully. Then he chuckled. "Then, what do you want to talk to me about? Or rather, what do you want me to do for you?" Lien Xingchen's words were full of interest. Not because of anything else, but because Luo Qingtong was really different from the rest. At this time, the Tianfeng Chu family wanted to kill her, and even used this opportunity to attack the young master of the Chu family. She actually spoke to him. Not only that, she seemed to be asking for help from the Lien family of the Flying Star sector. This was interesting. The Lien clan of the Flying Star planet was on the opposite side of the Tianfeng Chu clan, at least for now. Both from his perspective and from the perspective of the entire Lien family of the Flying Star sector, they all hoped that the Tianfeng Chu family would have internal strife. It would be best if the fight was as intense as possible. In that case, the Lien family of the Flying Star sector would naturally win the competition for the heavenly Luo grass. Under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong actually asked them for help. Didn't she know that they couldn't possibly help her? Before Luo Qingtong could reply to Lian Xingchen, Chu Yuqing had already burst into laughter. Haha, Luo Xiaoqi, I think you've lost your mind. You actually asked for help from the Lian family of the Flying Star sector? Why would they interfere with the affairs of the Tianfeng Chu clan? That will only bring trouble to themselves. Moreover, the competition for the heavenly Luo grass was imminent. The Tianfeng Chu clan was only doing this because they knew that killing Chu Lingfeng would bring them great benefits. Why would the Lian family of the Flying Star sector give up this great opportunity to help Chu Lingfeng while the Tianfeng Chu clan was fighting among themselves? Chapter 2635. Qi. Hearing Chu Yuqing's words, the other members of the Tianfeng Chu clan around him also showed faint expressions of mockery. Their gazes towards Luo Qingtong were full of scorn and disdain. Seeing this scene, Chu Kuer and Chu Yufei also showed smug smiles on their faces. Sister Yufei, this Luo Xiaoqi is dead for sure this time. It's ridiculous that she actually wants the Lian family of the Flying Star clan to help her. What a joke. Does she really think she's a beauty who can bring disaster to a country? She's an ugly man. Does she really think she's so charming that the young master of the Lian family of the Flying Star clan will help her regardless of everything? Chu Kuer covered her mouth and giggled. Her smile was full of malice. Hearing this, Chu Yufei also covered her mouth and giggled. Their smiles were indescribably bright and happy. Seeing Luo Qingtong suffer and be humiliated, they felt indescribably happy. Maybe young master Luo Xiaoqi is confident. Chu Yufei's voice was soft. She had always been gentle and kind in front of others, but this time, she couldn't help but feel happy in her heart. Her words were full of contempt. She almost directly said that Luo Qingtong was shameless and felt good about herself. Haha. Hearing this, Chu Kuer couldn't help but laugh out loud. While the two of them were in a good mood, Chu Xiaofeng, Chu Jingyi, and the others were very surprised. Especially Chu Jingyi. Looking at Luo Qingtong, he immediately frowned. His little cousin had said that she wasn't an ordinary person, and was very capable. Now it seemed that she was just an ordinary young man. She was actually so flustered when she encountered such a thing. Asking the Lian family of the Flying Star clan for help was no different from asking for humiliation. However, Chu Jingyi couldn't blame Luo Qingtong. After all, no one would be able to calm down in such a situation. Luo Qingtong was a young man with average strength and no reputation. She was also a mercenary with no background or experience. It was already very rare for her to think of asking the Lian family of the Flying Star clan for help. At least she wasn't scared to the point of tears and snot running down her face, and begging Chu Yuqing for mercy. If that was the case, they would really lose face. It was equivalent to slapping the young master in the face. Thinking, Chu Jingyi immediately wanted to ask Luo Qingtong to stop talking to the Lian family of the Flying Star clan. After all, the other party would not provide them with any help. Instead, they would watch the show from the sidelines. However, before he could speak, Luo Qingtong's Luo's voice. Young master, you've misunderstood. Luo Qingtong's lips were light, and her smile was charming and demonic. Luo S's family of the Flying Star clan of the Flying Star clan. On the other hand, the Lian family of the Flying Star sector should be asking for our help. As soon as she said that, everyone's faces froze. Especially the Lian family of the Flying Star clan. They all looked at Luo Qingtong with strange expressions. Was this person crazy? Were they in such a hurry to help her? And begging her to let them help her? This was the biggest joke in the world. Not to mention that she was currently in a disadvantageous position against the young master of the Chu family. She was already doomed. Even if they weren't, they wouldn't be in such a hurry to help her, much less meddle in the affairs of the Tianfeng Chu family. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.